Tag team wrestling doesn't always get its due, but has long been an important part of professional wrestling around the world. Tandem wrestling is a true art, and it takes a lot more than simply sticking two people together and saying, "Alright, go," to make a truly great team. So what does make a tag team truly great, or at least a lot better than all the other twosomes? We've considered match quality, longevity, drawing ability, and their wider influence on the business, among other things, when putting together our ranking. It's not an exact science, obviously, but we believe these teams have either put together a good enough body of work or left a lasting legacy that warrants recognition. And just a heads up before we start, we are just focusing on men's tag teams in this video. The women will get their own list later on. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 101 best professional wrestling tag teams ever. Join us! Number 101, the Powers of Pain. Sometimes it really is just as simple as putting two massive, intimidating, hard bastards together and letting them run through whoever is foolish enough to step in their path. After first feuding, the Barbarian and the Warlord came together in 1987 and arrived in Jim Crockett Promotions like a force of nature. The Road Warriors were natural adversaries, and the two teams feuded for months, their matches typically of the snug, no-frills variety. While the Powers of Pain didn't win the NWA tag team titles, they did, alongside Ivan Koloff, bag the six-man straps by beating Hawk, Animal, and Dusty Rhodes. After refusing to work dangerous scaffold matches, Barb and Warlord went to WWE and feuded with the Bolsheviks before engaging in a series with tag champs Demolition, a series which saw a double turn when Mr. Fuji left Axe and Smash to join the New Boys in Town. They never won the WWE tag team titles either, but they were well protected, rarely losing and looking impressive in matches with the Rockers and the Hart Foundation. They split in 1990, later to reform elsewhere, including as the Super Assassins in WCW, but their best work was in the late 80s and sneaks them onto our countdown. Number 100, the Dream Team. A pretty random union between two mid-card heels, the Dream Team of Greg Valentine and Brutus Beefcake first started teaming in May of 1985. By August, they had become WWE Tag Team Champions after beating the US Express in Philadelphia. The Hammer and the Future Barber had little glitz about them at a time when the rock and wrestling era was in full flow. Valentine was there to methodically and viciously chip away at opponents with a very basic and rugged style, while Beefcake was a meathead who took his cues from his more experienced partner. They had some very good matches with the likes of Ricky Steamboat and Tito Santana, the Killer Bees, and the Fabulous Rougeaus, but their best opponents were the British Bulldogs. Fittingly, the Dream Team's 226-day reign with the gold ended at the hands of Dynamite and Davey Boy in the best match at WrestleMania 2. A year later, they would break up, cutting short a run that felt like it had a lot left in it. The less said about the new Dream Team, with Brutus replaced by Dino Bravo, the better. Number 99, the Major Players. The pairing of IRL besties Kurt Hawkins and Zack Ryder, aka Matt Cardona, may not have resulted in any world-beating runs as champs or classic matches, but they did turn into a respectable team that truly understands the psychology of tag wrestling and are quite a bit better than many give them credit for. After teaming on the indies, Hawkins and Ryder, as the Major Brothers, did their time in WWE developmental before being brought to the main roster, where, after a brief spell as jobbers, they were soon made Edge's edgehead interference runners. Their association with the Rated R superstar gave them the opportunity to work with other top stars like Rey Mysterio, Batista, Ric Flair, and The Undertaker, and their impressive performances convinced WWE to make them tag champs at the 2008 Great American Bash. It wasn't an especially long reign, but it put them on the map and laid the foundation for their 2019 reunion, by which point they were much more polished pros and popular enough to get a second bite at the tag title cherry, winning the belts on the WrestleMania 35 kickoff show. It was another short reign, after which they became jobbers to the stars, but they got a chance to redeem themselves somewhat for Impact and on the indies. Number 98, the Dynamic Duo. They were only together for a little over a year and only teamed in one territory, but the team of Chris Adams and Gino Hernandez lit world-class championship wrestling on fire in 1985. Theirs was actually the second iteration of the Dynamic Duo, as Hernandez had previously teamed with Tully Blanchard. They were great and no doubt one of the top teams in Texas at the time, but things were taken to another level when the gentleman and gorgeous Gino forged their union. They were tremendous, arrogant playboy heels and seemingly read each other's minds about what to do inside the ring. They were just so good in there and really the perfect foils for the Von Erich brothers, who they squared off with many times in front of molten hot crowds. One of those was the famous double hair versus hair match at the second WCCW Cotton Bowl extravaganza, which they naturally lost to Kevin and Kerry. The dynamic duo were reigning as world-class tag champs when they split up. The resultant feud never got a chance to play out, as Hernandez sadly passed away just days after their first singles match. Truly, if their tag work was any indication, that feud would have been magic. Number 97, the Moondogs. There were various Moondogs over the decades, but the ones we are focusing on today are those of 1980s WWE fame. Rex and Spot were a familiar presence on WWE cards during that era, entertaining crowds with their wild appearance, shaggy hair, beards and cut-off jeans, and zany antics, such as chewing the bones that they brought to the ring. They were dedicated to the gimmick and delivered a quick chemistry, with Spot replacing Moondog King and slotting in seamlessly as one half of the WWE Tag Team Champs. They were unconventional and didn't even try to have great matches, but they put on a show for fans and became very popular, ensuring that they received opportunities elsewhere, such as the Continental Wrestling Association and later on with Smoky Mountain and the USWA. They had a routine that perhaps won't thrill modern fans, but it worked at the time, and the most famous iteration of the Moondogs did their job well. To leave them off our countdown would have been barking mad. Sorry. Number 96, the Eliminators. After first meeting at a nightclub in Boston, Perry Saturn and John Cronus started teaming in Jerry Lawler's Memphis territory in the early 1990s. The pay was low and the conditions far from glamorous, but working for the USWA gave the Eliminators valuable experience and their first set of tag team titles. Further experience was gained in the Japanese War promotion before they joined Paul Heyman's Extreme Championship Wrestling. It was in ECW that Saturn and Cronus would become cult favorites of the Philadelphia faithful, who appreciated their mix of high-flying and strong style. Akin to the ECW equivalent of the Road Warriors, the Eliminators were a tattooed, menacing and stocky pair that were just waiting for the chance to take some poor sap's head off with their awesome total elimination finisher. Matches with the Pitbulls, Rob Van Dam and Sabu, and the Dudleys stood out, and the two won the ECW tag team titles on 3 occasions. However, outside the ring, the two grew to loathe each other, and Saturn accepted an offer from WCW, forcing the Eliminators to disband. Number 95, Private Party. With Mark Quinn and Isaiah Cassidy, the talent and potential for greatness has never been in doubt. They have found themselves lost in the shuffle, not through a lack of ability, but mainly due to inconsistent booking and bad luck with injuries. Private Party showed promise as a high-flying tag team on the indies before signing with AEW in 2019 and scored a big upset victory over the Young Bucks on the second ever edition of Dynamite. That put them on the map in a big way, but it wasn't exactly followed up on, and Private Party spent the next couple of years entering entertaining performances but not really moving up the card, with many fans pointing to their association with Matt Hardy as something that hindered rather than helped them. Quinn suffering a torn pectoral muscle and missing a year of action also didn't help matters, but they reformed in 2024 and started regaining their lost momentum. The renewed push led them to a rekindled feud with the Bucks and a nice full circle moment as they beat Matthew and Nicholas Jackson in a banger to win the AEW tag straps for the first time. Watching Quen and Zay these days, one suspects that there's still a lot more to come from Private Party. Number 94, Mr. Fuji and Toru Tanaka. Professor Toru Tanaka had been pushed as a singles challenger to WWE champion Bruno Sammartino and had tagged with the likes of Gorilla Monsoon when he found a kindred spirit in the form of Mr. Fuji. Both were Hawaiian men portraying Japanese villains, as was the way of things in the early 1970s. Natural heat magnets, Tanaka and Fuji routinely employed devious tactics to win matches, with many a victory coming courtesy of Fuji's handful of salt to the eyes. Their biggest win as a unit came on June 27, 1972, when they defeated Sonny King and Chief Jay Strongbow to win their first of 3 WWE Tag Team titles. This first 337-day reign with the Gold saw them defend it in major matches, including a very famous outing against Sammartino and Pedro Morales. They left WWE in 74, but soon found success in the Georgia territory before going back to WWE in 77, where Classy Freddie Blassie guided them to their third set of tag titles. They left the company again after they dropped the straps and had short but fruitful runs in other territories before disbanding as the decade grew to a close. Not bad for two men who reportedly weren't especially fond of each other in real life. Number 93, the Killer Bees. While WWE imported some tremendous ready-made tag teams during during the mid-1980s golden era, they also partnered up some wrestlers who had never tagged together, like B. Brian Blair and Jumpin' Jim Brunzell, aka the Killer Bees, a name that Brunzell came up with, FYI. High-flying and athletic, the Bees had a style completely different to everyone else in the division and got over big thanks in part to their masked confusion gimmick that would see them pull the old switcheroo on unsuspecting heels. Blair and Brunzell were energetic and fun to watch and had a series of vastly underrated matches with the Hart Foundation. When in there with other bigger opponents, they played their underdog role well and got the crowd behind them. The fans may have liked them, but according to Brunzell, Vince McMahon did not, and they had a definite ceiling in the mid-card. The Frank Tunney Sr. Memorial Tag Tournament winners split up in '88 and were subsequently almost forgotten about when they really shouldn't have been. Number 92, the Texas Outlaws. Before he was the beloved American Dream, Dusty Rhodes was a despised rebel who wreaked havoc with his fellow Lone Star statesman Dick Murdoch. The Texas Outlaws were a pair of wild renegades who caused as much mayhem outside the ring as they did in it, the tales of their rowdy behavior the stuff of legend. Inside the squared circle, they rose to prominence during the late 1960s and early 70s, wrestling for territories around the world. Not a lot of footage from this era has survived, sadly, but the little that has happens to show the Outlaws in full flow and confirms that Rhodes was adept at being a bad guy before it became impossible to boo him. As for Murdoch, he was always an effective bad guy, and his brainbuster finisher was one of the deadliest in the biz. Dick and Dusty collected gold in the early 70s, including a 143-day reign as NWA World Tag Team Champions, before going their separate ways at the decade's midpoint. Close friends in real life, the two men would reform as and when the occasion called for it, and last teamed together in 1988. Number 91, the Good Brothers. Some of you may scoff at the idea of the Good Brothers, Carl Anderson and Luke Doc Gallows, being considered one of the top 101 tag teams of all time. But where some fans see a perhaps dull duo who they claim to be mediocre in the ring, we see a solid pair of hands that have flirted with greatness and have a trophy case of titles and other accomplishments as evidence of a productive decade plus together. Forming in New Japan after the Machine Gun's regular partner Giant Bernard left to return to WWE, the Bullet Club members tasted instant success by winning the 2013 World Tag League and then the IWGP Tag Belts at Wrestle Kingdom 8. They held them for a full year, lost them, and then had another short reign. Along with New Japan, the Good Brothers worked for Ring of Honor and various other indies around this time. Signed by WWE in 2016, Gallows and Anderson had a 4-year run that, though underwhelming overall, yielded 2 reigns as Raw Tag Team Champions. Good work for Impact, New Japan, and on the indies led them back to WWE, where sadly they weren't able to show half of what they are capable of before they were once again let go. It remains to be seen if they can rebuild their reputations the hard way. Number 90, Owen Hart and the British Bulldog. Owen Hart and Davey Boy Smith, aka the British Bulldog, enjoyed success with several different tag team partners. When they teamed up together in the mid to late 90s, they used all their experience and natural chemistry to great effect. A pair of absolute ribbers outside of the ring, the Stampede Wrestling alumni got the business done inside of it as members of the Camp Cornette stable. Debuting as a unit at WrestleMania 12, Owen and Davey Boy went on to win the tag team titles from the Smoking Guns at In Your House Mind Games. Their act was a riot, and they were clearly having a hell of a time tagging with one another. Getting into a scrape over the European Championship while still holding the tag belts, Hart and Smith eventually lost their titles to Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels in an absolute barn burner on Raw. Together during the enthralling Hart Foundation vs. the USA storyline, their time as a team ended when Bulldog departed the company in the aftermath of the Montreal Screwjob. A rare blend of technique, speed, power, and charisma, these two well-traveled vets could have accomplished so much more as a team, but what we got wasn't half bad. Number 89, the Soul Patrol. While Rocky Johnson may be best known as The Rock's father and Tony Atlas may be best known for his foot fetish and dressing like Fred Flintstone, back in the 1980s, the two men teamed up to make WWE history. Truth be told, the most electrifying dad in sports entertainment was something of a tag team specialist and had an impressive career before even making it to the company, and the freakishly strong Mr. USA was a decorated wrestler who enjoyed success in various territories. But together as the Soul Patrol, they broke ground when they became the first African-American team to win the WWE WWE Tag Team titles, which they accomplished by beating the Wild Samoans in a match that aired on December 9th, 1983. They defended their titles against Afa and Sika in rematches on the road for the next 4 months before falling to the North-South connection of Adrian Adonis and Dick Murdoch. They only wrestled about a dozen matches together afterwards before continuing to pursue their solo careers, having already left their mark on sports entertainment as a team. For historical reasons alone, these trailblazers make the cut. Number 88, DX, Triple H, and Shawn Michaels. D-Generation X might be better remembered by some as a fully fledged faction, their sophomoric antics perhaps lingering in the memory longer than their actual matches. But the 2006 reboot of DX Originals, Shawn Michaels and Triple H, bore a lot more fruit as far as decent matches and notable feuds are concerned. And the first duo the Game and the Heartbreak Kid battled with was none other than Vince and Shane McMahon. This also meant a bunch of matches with the Spirit Squad and a handicap Hell in a Cell match featuring The Big Show. These were entertaining, sure, but DX's best work was in their series with Rated RKO. Hunter's injury during their match at New Year's Revolution 2007 curtailed the DX reunion run, but they were back to their best in 2009 while taking on The Legacy and then Jericho. At TLC 2009, DX won their first and only pair of tag team titles when they beat Jericho in a plunder-filled gem. Their subsequent reign wasn't an all-timer or anything, but by virtue of 2 major stars simply being in possession of the gold, DX momentarily elevated the titles. Number 87, Too Cool. Making their debut by helping to make up the numbers in the Tag Team Battle Royal at WrestleMania 14, I would wager that not many predicted big things for the thrown-together tandem of Brian Christopher and Scott Taylor. Initially called Too Much, Taylor and Christopher predominantly plied their trade on weekend show Shotgun Saturday Night. If they did make it to Raw, pay-per-view, or even Sunday Night's Heat, it was invariably to perform job duty for more established teams, something that they did well. Their fortunes changed in October of 1999 after they received a makeover as well as new names. Now going by Too Cool, Grandmaster Sexay and Scotty 2 Hotty began picking up some wins as part of their push. Adding Rikishi Fatu and coming up with a well-received post-match dance routine caused their popularity to skyrocket, and they soon found themselves as one of the most over acts in the business. In the ring, they typically kept things within the basic WWE TV formula for tag matches, but they didn't exactly have to do anything too complex to get a big reaction, especially when Scotty had the worm in his back pocket. A 1-month reign as WWE Tag Champs came at the peak of their popularity, after which their push stalled and they fell well down the pecking order. Their WWE run ended with Christopher's release in 2001, though they did later do the Indies and made a couple of nostalgia appearances on Raw and for NXT. Number 86, The Bludgeon Brothers. Surveying the prospects down in their developmental system, WWE saw the 2 big scary blokes with beards and said, "Alright lads, you're gonna be a tag team now." Luke Harper and Eric Rowan soon shacked up with Bray Wyatt as members of his nefarious family, and while they're perhaps best remembered for what they did as a stable, Harper and Rowan as a team accomplished much to brag about, such as their reigns as NXT and SmackDown Tag Team Champions. As members of the Wyatt family, Harper and Rowan had good matches with the Usos, Daniel Bryan and CM Punk, and more, while also wrestling plenty of 6- and 8-man tags. Their sheer size and focus on power moves made them instantly come across like a force to be reckoned with, and after some stop-start pushes due to injuries and whatnot, they were given a makeover and renewed push as the Bludgeon Brothers. More good matches with the New Day and a very good tornado tag against Bryan and Roman Reigns suggested that they would be given further opportunities up the card, but it just never happened, and they were split up in the 2019 draft, with the late great Harper requesting and receiving his release soon after. They will always have WrestleMania 34. Number 85, The American Wolves. One of the best pure wrestling tag teams of recent times, the American Wolves tandem of Davey Richards and Eddie Edwards made up for a perceived lack of charisma and mic skills by working their little wolfy butts off bell to bell. They had a similar style, heavily inspired by Japanese wrestling, with Edwards the more calculating and cerebral member, and Richards the more intense and explosive. They first gained notice in Ring of Honor at a time when the promotion had no shortage of great tag teams for them to work with. They won the ROH tag titles twice, though their second spell with the belts was brief. Post Ring of Honor, the Wolves turned up in TNA and ended up winning the promotion's tag titles a joint record 5 times, having some tremendous matches along the way, such as their series with Austin Aries and Bobby Roode. Davey and Eddie have had commendable singles careers too, and have also feuded against one another on a couple of occasions. As a tag team, however, they really did look and act the part, and stood out as two men who clearly took their craft seriously and strived to be the absolute best that they could be. Number 84, the Koloffs. Of all the fake Russians terrorizing the world of pro wrestling during the 1970s and 80s, Ivan Koloff was probably the best. The former WWE champion tagged up with storyline nephew Nikita in the mid-80s, not long after Ivan had dropped the NWA World Tag Team titles he held with Don Knodel. Known as the Russians, the uncle and nephew team, aided by American turncoat Crusher Khrushchev, ran roughshod in the Crockett territory and soon won back the straps by beating Dusty Rhodes and Manny Fernandez. Ivan was obviously the more experienced and held things together, while Nikita was raw but clearly loaded with potential and was presented as an unstoppable powerhouse. They were also able to invoke the Freebird rule, allowing Khrushchev to defend the titles as well, the three of them adding the NWA World 6-man titles to their haul. The Russians had a great feud with the Rock and Roll Express, the little versus large combination working wonders, and you know what also worked? Their knockdown, drag-out series of brawls with the Road Warriors. An unlikely babyface turn by Nikita meant that the Koloffs were a short-lived team, but they managed to have quite the run in the few years they were together. Number 83, La Pareja Atomica. In 1945, two members of Lucha Libre royalty combined their powers to create an unstoppable force. La Pareja Atomica, translation the Atomic Pair, was the melding of the brawling El Santo and the technically savvy Gory Guerrero. They were a headline act who supposedly never lost a match, though there is evidence to dispute this, and engaged in a series of wild and woolly matches with the teams of Cavernario Galindo and Black Shadow. Santo was obviously the star of the team and became a cultural icon in his native Mexico, but Gory was the one who held things together with his rock-solid grappling. They were friends outside the ring and would team intermittently after their big run as a doubles act, with Santo adopting Guerrero's invention, the camel clutch, as his own finisher. Sadly, very little footage of their matches as a team has survived to see the light of day, but their impact on the sport and box office business is undeniable. In fact, the team was so well regarded that their sons Eddie Guerrero and El Hijo del Santo rebooted it to great acclaim during the 90s. Number 82, Sergeant Slaughter and Don Knodel. Although more often than not, members of a tag team are viewed as being on equal footing, there are cases when an established main eventer gets together with somebody lower down the card. And that's what Jim Crockett Promotions did when they put Sergeant Slaughter with Don Knodel, who Sarge had taken under his wing as one of his privates. Sergeant Slaughter's privates, lol. In the storyline, Slaughter's training helped toughen Knodel up, and the two men started racking up victories, leading to a major NWA Tag Title Tournament final victory over Giant Baba and Antonio Inoki. The tournament was entirely made up, naturally, but Slaughter and Knodel were champs, and the dastardly pair of military men began to target Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood, leading to a phenomenal series of bouts that did big business for JCP. Their feud peaked in the gripping Final Conflict steel cage match, where Steamboat and Youngblood took the gold. The rematches, many of which took place in a cage, headlined around the Carolinas for the remainder of the year before Slaughter and Knodel lost a match that forced their breakup and saw Sarge leave for WWE. Number 81, Bad Influence. Bad Influence, also known as Addiction, provided something of a career renaissance for hard-working TNA veterans Christopher Daniels and Frankie Kazarian. The Fallen Angel had been in a couple of decent tandems, including Triple X and his team with AJ Styles, while Kaz had a rather forgettable run alongside Michael Shane. Kaz really started to come into his own while teaming with the more experienced Daniels, who may have been slowing down but clearly still knew how to hold a match together. Not only were they able to have good matches with everybody in TNA and then Ring of Honor, bouts with the Motor City Machine Guns, Young Bucks, and AJ Styles and Kurt Angle are well worth tracking down, but they also began to show oodles of personality both in the ring and during promos. Daniels and Kazarian had two runs with both the TNA and Ring of Honor tag team titles, their time with the ROH straps lasting more than twice as long as their time with TNA's, as they laid their claim to being one of the top teams of the 2010s. An AEW run as part of SoCal Uncensored with Scorpio Sky did have merit, but the true influence of Bad Influence was felt several years prior. Number 80, the Street Profits. The Street Profits, that's Montez Ford and Angelo Dawkins, are only the third team in WWE history to win the Raw, SmackDown, and NXT tag titles, achieving the feat within 499 days. The black and gold came first, with the Profits snatching the vacant straps in a four-way tag team ladder match at TakeOver 25. Not long after losing them, they were formally drafted to the main roster, which seemed like an inevitability considering how good they had gotten while plying their trade for the developmental league. 2020 may have been a pretty rotten year all round, but it was a breakout one for Ford and Dawkins, who won the Raw tag titles and then began defending the SmackDown ones after trading with the New Day following their switch to the blue brand. The Street Profits got over because they were athletic, looked and acted like a proper team, and had bags of personality to go with their obvious skills in the ring. There's a sense that they've been drifting in recent times and could use a freshen up, while some peg Tez as a major future singles player. Regardless of what does happen in the next few years, they've done pretty well to distinguish themselves as one of WWE's better and more popular modern tag teams. Number 79, the Fabulous Rougeaus. Brothers Jacques and Raymond Rougeau got their start in their family's Montreal-based promotion in the late 1970s before moving on to a bigger local promotion and earning a reputation that would lead them to being signed by WWE in 1986. Brought in as clean-cut babyfaces, they were a fine, well-polished act and had good matches with the Dream Team and Demolition, but never really got over as good guys. A heel turn completely rejuvenated the team, however, gradually turning to the dark side before shacking up with heat magnet Jimmy Hart and dubbing themselves the Fabulous Rougeau Brothers. Sarcastically proclaiming themselves to be pro-USA All-American boys, they were a riot and really started to generate the responses that their work deserved. Bouts with the Hart Foundation, the Rockers, and the British Bulldogs were customarily top-notch affairs. Of course, there is also their notorious outside-the-ring issues with Dynamite Kid, but that shouldn't distract from a very good resume belonging to a rather underrated team that never won the WWE Tag Team titles, save for an unrecognized switch on a house show. Their run came to an end when Raymond retired in 1990. Years later, Jacques would find further doubles division success with Pierre Carloulet as the Quebecers. Number 78, Dick Murdoch and Adrian Adonis. Remember the good old days when wrestlers used to be called things like Dick Murdoch and Adrian Adonis? As well as having great names individually, Adonis and Murdoch were collectively one of the great, somewhat unsung heel tag teams of their day. They first started teaming up in New Japan in the early 80s, with their most notable outing being a loss to Hulk Hogan and Antonio Inoki in the finals of the 1983 World Tag League Tournament. Moving to WWE in early 1984, it didn't take the so-called North-South connection long to win tag team gold there, defeating the Soul Patrol in a match broadcast that May. During their 279-day reign, Adonis and Murdoch saw off the likes of the Briscoe brothers, the Wild Samoans, and the US Express before losing the straps to Wyndham and Rotunda in Madison Square Garden. They may have had the appearance of a couple of drunk uncles, but both men could get it done in the ring, and they were a very effective heel tag team, expertly cutting the ring in half and getting heat on their opponents before bumping like maniacs for the inevitable comeback. After going their separate ways, they reunited in New Japan, wrestling there until just a couple of weeks before Adonis's tragic death. Number 77, Doom. Look at Butch Reed. Now look at Ron Simmons. You can sort of see why they were called Doom, can't you? Introduced by their manager Nancy Sullivan, aka Woman, as the opponents for the Steiner brothers at Halloween Havoc 1989, Doom made an immediate impression with their masked appearance and hard-nosed, no-nonsense style. Just a few months into their run, Doom lost a match to the Steiners and were forced to unmask. Rather than being a setback, this allowed Simmons and Reed a new level of freedom and helped improve their performances in the ring. Beating the Steiners for the WCW tag straps at Capital Combat 1990, Doom went on a tear defending the titles against all comers, which included a feud with members of the Four Horsemen, the highlight of which was a cracking defense against Anderson and Wyndham at Starrcade. Their 281-day reign came to an end at the hands of the fabulous Freebirds at WrestleWar 1991, after which Simmons and Reeds immediately broke up and began feuding with each other. An underrated and oft overlooked duo, Doom were a fearsome presence between the ropes and managed managed to leave a lasting impression in the less than a year and a half they were together as a team. Number 76, The Fantastics. Considering just how good they were in the ring and given the amount of places they found success, The Fantastics remain an underrated tag team. Tommy Rogers and Bobby Fulton began teaming in Mid-South and World Class in the mid-1980s, their pretty boy babyface act perhaps not totally in tune with the audience they were performing in front of. Their work in the ring was a cut above mine, and that stopped any potential jeers from coming their way. They just worked so hard, whether in a 45-minute balls-to-the-wall Southern wrestling special with the Midnight Express or a bloody dogfight with the Sheepherders. The Fantastics counted the AWA Southern, NWA United States, NWA American, UWF, and World Class tag teams in their collection, though their star seemed to fade as the 80s came to a close and Rogers was replaced by Bobby's brother Jackie. Rogers and Fulton reunited in the 90s for successful tours of All Japan and not-so-successful stints in WCW. They were considered past their best by then, but when they were at their best, they really were, well, they were fantastic, weren't they? You know, clues in the name. Number 75, Rob Van Dam and Sabu. Having both trained under Sabu's uncle, the original Sheik, Rob Van Dam and Sabu spent years fighting each other on the indies before forming a pact in ECW in 1996. Two of the most unique professional wrestlers of theirs or really any generation, RVD and Sabu brought an air of danger and unpredictability even by ECW's high standards thanks to their novel offense and dangerous stunts. Were they a trifle sloppy at times? Yes. Did they sometimes rely on high spots over coherent wrestling and logical transitions? You could also say yes. But that wasn't really in keeping with the spirit of ECW, a spirit that Van Dam and Sabu embodied more than most. The two-time ECW Tag Team Champions had memorable outings with the Dudleys, the Eliminators, the members of the Triple Threat, and the Can-Am Express, while also leaving their mark overseas for All Japan. Years later, they got to tag once again as part of WWE's rebooted version of ECW. Was it the same? Nah, not really, but they were still an exciting team that had some decent matches even with the added constraints. Plus, you know what? They just looked bloody cool together, didn't they? Number 74, M&M. In an era where SmackDown was populated by teams like the rebooted Legion of Doom and the Dicks, the duo of M&M stood out as an act that brought much-needed credibility to the scene. Flanked by Melina, Joey Mercury and Johnny Nitro won the WWE Tag Team titles in their very first televised match, beating none other than the team of Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio. Having honed their routine down in developmental, they may have been a tad green, but M&M were ready for the main roster, their entrance, ring garb and finisher, the snapshot, standing out as unique and catching the eye of the viewer. They were already good, but got noticeably better and were good value for 3 tag title reigns. Their first run together was unfortunately brought to a premature end because of backstage and personal issues, but they got back together months later for a series of matches with the Hardys. One of the best tag teams of the 2000s, M&M were a very effective bumping and feeding heel unit that always made their opponents shine while putting in a serious shift. Would have probably been higher on our countdown had they been together longer. Number 73, The Public Enemy. A team very much of their time and place, The Public Enemy started off as adversaries before coming together over their shared love of hip-hop culture while in ECW. They got over very quickly thanks to their wild brawling style, penchant for breaking tables, still a novelty in the early 90s, and for inviting fans into the ring for post-match dance parties. One time during the end of their run in the land of extreme, the sheer amount of fans who took them up on the offer caused the ring to collapse. The 4-time ECW Tag Team Champions attracted interest from elsewhere and ended up signing with WCW in early 96. Their near 3-year stay included a sole 8-day reign as WCW Tag Team Champions, and there were a few decent matches here and there, but Johnny Grunge and Flyboy Rocco Rock never quite fit in Ted Turner's organization. A return to ECW was curtailed when they negotiated and signed with WWE, where their most notable contribution was being on the receiving end of an acolyte's ass-kicking in a notoriously stiff squash match. A potential WCW return never got off the ground, and they finished off their days on the indies. Rock passed away in 2002, with Grunge following him in 2006. Though they were inconsistent and underperformed on bigger stages, their work in ECW was memorable even if it hasn't necessarily aged well. Number 72, Los Guerreros del Infierno. That's the Warriors from Hell to you and me. And as Lucha Libre's premier heel tag team of the 2000s, Ultimo Guerrero and Rey Bucanero were just that. The fulcrum of a wider stable, Guerrero and Bucanero won their first of 3 CMLL tag team titles in 2000, demonstrating a great in-ring understanding from the off. And they only got better with time and dominated in CMLL, where they went up against some of the top babyface tandems of the time, having some excellent and very heated bouts in front of large, enthusiastic crowds. Their strong work in Mexico caught the attention of other promotions around the world, including TNA and several companies in Japan who brought them in for special occasions and tours. Their prime may have been 2 decades ago, but as of 2025, when this video was recorded, Los Guerreros del Infierno was still getting booked together on indie shows. For longevity, drawing ability, and having some of the best, most innovative doubles offense of the time, this pair of super cool rudos deserve their place in the 101. Number 71, Team Hell No. The sworn enemies become teammates trope is a well-worn one in pro wrestling, but it's fair to say that sometimes it works better than others. One of the best examples of an uneasy alliance turning into something brilliant is the formation of Team Hell No. After warring throughout the summer of 2012, Kane and Daniel Bryan were forced to attend anger management classes by Raw General Manager AJ Lee. After working out their differences, they quickly won the WWE Tag Team titles. Their work in the ring was, as you would expect, very good, and the Little and Large Act became a well-oiled machine in no time at all. They had some particularly good matches with The Shield, but it wasn't just the ring work that was entertaining from Team Hell No. Their interviews, segments, and post-match hug it out antics were just great fun too. They held the tag straps for 246 days before losing them to Rollins and Reigns. Though D-Bry began to focus on his singles career and world title pursuits after they dropped the straps, Team Hell No did reunite for a brief run in 2018. Still should have been called Team Friendship though. Idiots. Number 70, Money Inc. After a successful spell working house shows together, the team of Ted DiBiase Sr. and Erwin R. Shyster debuted on WWE television in February of 1992. The $1 Million Man and IRS were a tremendous combination of personalities on paper, and fortunately, the man who has all the money and the guy who takes all your money were a winning unit IRL too. Easy to loathe, Money Inc. got a ton of heat and milked it for all it was worth. They were so over that they remained the top heel tag team in WWE for the duration of their 18-month tenure together, despite the fact that DiBiase was very much in the twilight of his in-ring career. 3-time WWE World Tag Team Champions, they managed to hold on to the gold for a combined 411 days, seeing off the likes of the Natural Disasters, the Steiner Brothers, LOD, and the Mega Maniacs. Their matches weren't exactly classics, I mean these boys just loved to slap on a long chin lock, but they were certainly effective and they could really go when they had their working boots on, or when the Steiner Brothers forced them to put their working boots on anyway. Number 69, Homicide and Hernandez. A gritty big man little man combo, the team of Homicide and Hernandez, also known as the OGs, emerged as the breakout stars from the original incarnation of TNA's Latin American exchange group. Overflowing with swagger, the LAX twosome quickly became one of the hottest acts in the promotion, and the decision was made to have them beat AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels for the NWA Tag Team titles after they had just had a couple of televised matches together. They lost them back to the Phenomenal Angels after just a couple of weeks, yes, but it wasn't the only time they would hold the gold. It was also not the only time they would have a great match with AJ and Daniels, who they met in a series of extravagant gimmick bouts, including Ultimate X and 6 Sides of Steel. Fulfilling feuds and matches with America's Most Wanted, Team 3D, and Beer Money Inc. set them apart as a team that could be programmed with anyone and make it interesting. The race-baiting angles and promos weren't the best, though that is admittedly coming from my honky-ass white boy perspective, but in the ring they hardly put a foot wrong and earned their 2 NWA Tag Team and 1 TNA Tag Title reigns. They later reunited in Impact for a natural showdown with the Santana and Ortiz version of LAX. Number 68, American Alpha. In the vein of the Steiners and the world's greatest tag team, NXT's American Alpha were a couple of no-nonsense, singlet-wearing amateur experts that did their talking through their wrestling. The two men came together thanks to a storyline where Chad Gable was actively recruiting Jason Jordan to be his partner, with Jordan finally relenting after 2 months of coaxing. Originally heels, they were so good in the ring that they organically became babyfaces to the NXT crowd, having an impressive showing in the 2015 Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic and getting big wins over former NXT Tag Team champions like the Ascension and the Vaudevillains. Their best work as a team came during their series of matches with the Revival, with Jordan and Gable beating Dash and Dawson to bag the tag straps at NXT TakeOver Dallas. Their title run was short, but yielded more great matches with the Revival. Soon after, American Alpha were drafted to SmackDown, where they were in the mix for the Blue Brand's newly created tag team titles. They won the belts and held onto them for 84 days before losing them to the Usos. Unfortunately, they never won them back, and after a year on the main roster, American Alpha was split up in the 2017 draft, with Jordan being moved to Raw. A great throwback team that created excitement with their predominantly technical style, American Alpha weren't together for too long, but left fans wanting more. Number 67, Rated RKO. Edge and Randy Orton first teamed up on the June 20th, 2006 edition of ECW on Sci-Fi, losing to the team of Kurt Angle and Rob Van Dam. This was not a sign of things to come, however, because when they joined forces proper in October, they started taking some very big scalps, targeting D-Generation X because they felt like Triple H and Shawn Michaels had prevented them from becoming true main event players. Rated RKO scored a big win thanks to some help from special referee Eric Bischoff when the two teams met at Cyber Sunday. 8 days later, Orton and Edge would capture the World Tag Team Championships, which they successfully defended against DX and the Hardys on TV. Carrying two sizable chips on their shoulders, Rated RKO, who were briefly managed by Lita before her retirement, were dominant in the ring and entertaining outside of it, more than holding their own against main rivals The Game and the Heartbreak Kid, with whom they had obvious chemistry. They eventually lost their titles to Michaels and John Cena, which started the dissension that would ultimately lead to their breakup. Very short-lived, but very good while they lasted, Rated RKO reunited for a one-off episode of SmackDown in 2011. Number 66, John Morrison and The Miz. WWE Tough Enough had its critics, but you cannot deny that it wasn't at least sometimes successful when it came to creating stars. The two best were Season 3 winner John Morrison and Season 4 runner-up The Miz, who have both had distinguished singles careers. Initially at odds, Miz and Morrison joined forces in late 2007 when they were rivals and beat fellow squabblers Matt Hardy and MVP to win the WWE Tag Team titles. This was not some shock title change done for the sake of it, mind. Miz and Morrison would hold the straps for 250 days, improving their act every week both in the ring and as stars of their own web show The Dirt Sheets. Easy to dislike but undoubtedly effective in the ring, the Shaman of Sexy and the Awesome One made the titles ECW exclusive for a time and had rewarding matches with ephemeral teams like Jesse and Festus and Shannon Moore and Jimmy Wang Yang. They dropped the WWE Tag Team titles without being pinned, but quickly bounced back to win the World Tag Team titles on a house show. They would break up and subsequently feud before reuniting their act for a run that predominantly took place during the pandemic. Number 65, America's Most Wanted. The team of Wildcat Chris Harris and Cowboy James Storm were one of the early-day TNA success stories and did as much as any other when it came to putting the company's doubles division on the map. America's Most Wanted, or AMW for short, won their first set of NWA tag titles just a few months after forming in mid-2002. They were belts that the team would win a record-setting 6 times, holding them in their possession for a combined 517 days. The key to their success was their chemistry, similarity, and ability to adapt to their opponents. Indeed, Harris and Storm could have a good match with just about anybody, whether it was a bloody brawl with a pair of bruisers or a straight match with members of the X Division. They were lucky in that they had teams like Triple X, The Naturals, Team Canada, and Christopher Daniels and AJ Styles to dance with, but AMW were very much the glue that held the division together and were tremendously consistent. Their best match as a team was no doubt their Turning Point 2004 cage match headliner with Daniels and Elix Skipper, though their TNA tenure was littered with rewarding contests. They split and feuded, with Storm finding a new partner in the form of Bobby Roode and Harris finding a new nightmare in the form of Braden Walker. Number 64, Strikeforce. Sometimes when you have two talented high-flying babyfaces that aren't doing much individually, you put them together as a tag team and tell them to smile and wave and fly high and put on good matches, and It just works. That was the story of Strikeforce, the impossible-to-hate pairing of hard-grafting workhorses Rick Martel and Tito Santana, with Martel picking up right where he left off after his run with Tom Zenk in the similar Can-Am connection. Possessing great speed, technique, and a never-say-quit attitude, Strikeforce were easy to root for and a joy to watch work against teams like the Islanders, the Hart Foundation, and Demolition. They beat Brett and Big Jim for the tag straps and held them for 152 days before Axe and Smash axed and smashed them for the belts at WrestleMania 4. The team broke up a few months later so that Martel could take some time off in order to look after his ailing wife, reuniting for what turned out to be their last match against the Brainbusters at Mania 5. That's where the big breakup and turn took place, though they strangely never had the big singles match blow-off that their brief but memorable run as a team warranted. Number 63, The Sheik and Abdullah the Butcher. Two of the most barbaric and bloodthirsty villains ever had plenty of claret-filled brawls against each other in their time as they took their traveling freak show across the United States. Fans who witnessed those brutal battles fondly remembered the spectacle of it all, but those same fans may have been unaware that The Sheik and Abdullah the Butcher actually teamed up on the other side of the world. Big draws in the Far East, the two wild men were a major threat in All Japan during the late 1970s and early 80s. They may not have brought much technical proficiency to proceedings, but Abby and Ed Farhat brought plenty of crowd heat and emotion and had many thrilling matches, including a legendary series with the Funk Brothers, the best match of which took place in the 1979 Real World Tag League, which happened to be the culmination of their feud. It was also one of the rare occasions that the team were properly beaten, as they rarely lost, something that, along with their strict adherence to keeping kayfabe, helped them maintain an aura that helped them draw a lot of money. Number 62, The Brotherhood. Before breaking out as a single star, Cody Rhodes was something of a tag team specialist, variously teaming up with Hardcore Holly, Ted DiBiase Jr., Drew McIntyre, and Damian Sandow to differing levels of success. But blood is thicker than Bob Holly's biceps, and Cody found his best partner in the form of his half-brother Goldust. Dustin Runnels was no stranger to the tag game himself, and used his immense experience and veteran instincts to great effect. Their very first match as a team, where they took on Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns at Battleground 2013, was a classic filled with emotion, and in just their fourth match together, the Rhodes brothers beat the Shield Boys to win their first of two WWE Tag Team titles. They had great matches against the Usos and the All-American Americans too, as well as many multi-team bouts and stirring six-mans. The team lost a lot of its luster when Cody transformed into the lamentable Stardust, yes, but they were at least able to finish their story off proper when they hooked up again in AEW for matches opposite the Young Bucks and Lucha Bros. Cody and Dustin have had long distinguished careers and are most known for their singles work, but their time as a tag team came at a crucial crossroads in their careers, both helping them and boosting WWE's tag scene. Number 61, Kings of Wrestling. Though the name Kings of Wrestling originated with a larger stable from the Chikara promotion in the mid-2000s, it is mostly associated with the tag team of Claudio Castagnoli and Chris Hero. Their first 2 years as a team were laden with gold, as they came to hold the tag titles of not just Chikara, but also Ring of Honor and Combat Zone Wrestling at the same time. They only dropped the belts when it was thought that Claudio was on his way to WWE, but that turned out to be a false dawn. Nevertheless, the team split up for a couple of years, but picked up right where they left off when they reformed, and then some. The Swiss Superman and a leaner, meaner Hero became one of the true highlights of Ring of Honor. They're very similar and very European strike-based style, matching up well with teams like the Briscoe, World's Greatest Tag Team, and more. Outside of ROH, where they had a sensational year-long reign as tag champs between April 2010 and 2011, they brought the goods to PWG, Pro Wrestling Noah, and other leagues around the world. Sadly, they never got to show their stuff together on a national stage, but as far as tag teams at the independent level go, they don't come much better than the Kings of Wrestling. Number 60, Paul London and Brian Kendrick. Given their size and style and unfavorable standing in the backstage pecking order, it's a big surprise that the team of Paul London and Brian Kendrick became WWE Tag Team Champions at all. More surprising still is the fact that they had one of the longest reigns in history. Because even though they might have been shorter and skinnier than management wanted, London and Kendrick, sometimes referred to as the Hooligans, made up for any perceived shortcomings with their obvious and abundant talent as wrestlers. After defeating Eminem to win the straps, they defended them against opposition that, to be frank, wasn't the strongest on paper. But it's to Lundrick's Critics credit that they were able to have compelling matches with the likes of the Pitbulls, Casey James and Idol Stevens, William Regal and Dave Taylor, and Deuce and Domino. Their timing and selling, drawing sympathy from what could have easily been apathetic crowds, helped set up their blistering all-energy comebacks and made them firm fan favourites on SmackDown, where they reigned as champs for almost a full year. Post-WWE, London and Kendrick teamed up to have good matches with the next generation of talent on the international indie scene. Number 59, the APA. A classic case of throwing two stalling performers together and hoping for the best, the union between Farouk and Bradshaw helped revive their stuttering careers. After a couple of months working out the kinks, the real-life drinking buddies joined their pal The Undertaker's Ministry of Darkness stable. Dubbed the Acolytes, they won their first set of tag team titles from Kane and X-Pac and began a feud with the Hardys. Bradshaw and Farouk were rugged enforcers who were often put in there with other teams WWE were looking to test out, such as the Public Enemy and the Dudleys. Typically featuring very few frills, their matches were brawls interspersed with power-based offense, and they really laid their stuff in too, giving their work a heightened sense of realism. After their time in the Ministry, they would become babyfaces as the Acolyte Protection Agency, with the gimmick that they would accept cash from WWE stars to act as their bodyguards. When the three-time WWE Tag Team Champions emerged from behind the curtain, you knew it was on. Pretty much a mid-card act in the era of TLC, the APA were nonetheless very over and stuck around for the best part of 6 years as a solid and dependable unit who were always pounding ass. Number 58, DIY. Good friends, better enemies. Or should that be great enemies that are somehow even better when they're friends? The saga of Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa has played out on WWE screens since they first teamed together in NXT's 2015 Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic. It was obvious from the get-go that WWE had something there, and they smartly pushed DIY the following year all the way to an NXT title triumph against the Revival in a classic 2 out of 3 falls bout at TakeOver Toronto. The only thing stopping them from having multiple reigns as champs was themselves, as their bitter feud took center stage and prevented them from teaming for a couple of years. When they were teaming, they displayed a great natural chemistry and penchant for producing epic matches stuffed with novel teamwork and an abundance of false finishes. As well as their series with the Revival, DIY also had standout scraps with the Authors of Pain, Mustache Mountain, The Undisputed Era, and more. Granted, their main roster work hasn't been as exceptional thus far, but they are two-time WWE Tag Team Champions already, and with the right push, could be world beaters once more, provided one doesn't turn on the other anyway. Number 57, the Hollywood Blondes. As Steve Austin tells it, he was mighty miffed when he was informed by WCW Creative that he was going to be put into a tag team with Brian Pillman. Stunning Steve had designs on a solo title run and didn't relish the chance to work alongside Fly and Brian. However, the two conspired to make the best out of the situation, going from two guys thrown together to a proper unit on the same page, with signature moves, matching gear, and a winning heel personality that got under the skin of their opponents and fans alike. Their series of matches with Ricky Steamboat and Shane Douglas were sublime, while the 2 out of 3 falls bout with Ric Flair and Arn Anderson at a Clash of the Champions special proved that they could hang in the main event. Growing in confidence with every match, the Hollywood Blondes could have been one of the very best tag teams of all time. But perhaps as punishment for daring to get over to the extent with which they did, Austin and Pillman were broken up after just 1 year. It is a testament to the strength of their work in that relatively short amount of time that fans still hold them in such high esteem today. Number 56, Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens. Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed Canadian independent wrestlers Kevin Steen and El Generico cut their teeth in burgeoning California indie league PWG in the mid-2000s before the two-time PWG Tag Team Champions went to the bigger stage of Ring of Honor. They won the ROH tag belts too, of course, holding them for a not-too-shabby 203 days. But titles were almost beside the point with Steen Erico. It was about the moments and matches, and they had plenty excellent ones of those. The Briscoes, American Wolves, and Young Bucks were just a few of the tandems that Steen and Generico made magic with during a productive 3-year run. Warring enemies when they weren't on the same side, Owens and Zayn managed to squeeze in a few memorable bouts back at PWG before both signed with WWE. Since joining WWE as Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, sorry for not maintaining the Generico Zayn ruse by the way, but how about you grow up? The indie standouts have had some total and utter barn burners with a range of opponents in a WWE ring. Their peak was undoubtedly their tag title triumph over the Usos in the main event of WrestleMania 39, just reward for almost 2 decades of toil. Number 55, Los Guerreros. Eddie Guerrero and Chavo Guerrero may have been uncle and nephew, but they grew up practically as brothers due to their 3-year age gap. Initially entertaining punters as kids while wrestling against each other during the intermission of Guerrero family patriarch Gory Guerrero shows, they began tagging together during their days in WCW, though Eddie's tough love approach ensured that it was short-lived and led to a feud. Chavo wasn't quite able to keep up with the far more polished and experienced Eddie at that time, but he was ready when they joined up once again in WWE in 2002. After just a few months of regularly teaming together, Los Guerreros lied, cheated, and stole their way to their first set of tag team titles, winning them in Madison Square Garden and Survivor Series 2002. Smooth as silk and oozing confidence, Eddie and Chavo could have a good match with anyone and was so entertaining that they ended up accidentally turning themselves babyface. Their series against Team Angle / the world's greatest tag team in particular was fantastic, and they had probably only just scratched the surface of what they were capable of when they split up and Latino Heat was pushed to the top as a solo star. As it is, for about a year or so, there were few, if any, tag teams who could work at the same standard as Eddie and Chavo. Number 54, Beer Money Inc. James Storm didn't just sit around lamenting the dissolution of America's Most Wanted. On the contrary, he got pissed up and found himself a sugar daddy. And thus, Beer Money Inc. was born. Bobby Roode himself was coming from a successful tag team, having been a member of Team Canada. Both men could work, looked the part, and had distinct personalities. Throw in a valet/manager in the form of Jacqueline, and they came across like a polished act from the off. Between 2008 and 2011, they were the best tag team in TNA and one of the best things in the company, period. Adept at working with any style and having a good match, they had plenty of those with LAX, Team 3D, the Motor City Machine Guns, and others, it is no wonder TNA put their tag titles on them so many times. And they were great when they weren't wrestling too, delivering strong promos and participating in entertaining skits and angles. For what was quite clearly a case of, we've got nothing to do with these two guys, so let's put them together and see what happens, at least initially, Beer Money was a triumph that helped the careers of both men, particularly Roode, who would ascend to main event status soon after by beating his now former partner for the TNA World Heavyweight title. Number 53, the Can-Am Express. America and Canada finally put their differences aside in the late 1980s when Doug Furnas and Dan Crofat, aka Phil LaFon, formed the Can-Am Express, not to be confused with the Can-Am Connection, by the way. Mainstays of All Japan during the early to mid-90s, Furnas and LaFon routinely had incredible matches with a wide variety of both Japanese and foreign opposition. Fans of that era will, to this day, point out a match that the Can-Am Express had with Kenta Kobashi and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi as one of the very best ever to grace an All Japan ring. And just think for a minute how high that bar was. Furnas and LaFon were incredibly smooth and only got better as the years went on. They were both athletic, with Phil opting for a more technical and high-flying style that blended nicely with Doug's more power-based offense. The 5-time All-Asia Tag Team Champions went to WWE in 1996, where they weren't pushed nearly as strongly, but still showed occasional glimpses of their brilliance, despite not having the sort of charisma typical of WWE stars. They spent a bit of time in ECW in 97, winning the promotion's tag titles for a day before splitting up and going their separate ways. Number 52, the world's greatest tag team. While toiling away in the WWE developmental system, Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas were tagging with other partners. Shelton was one half of the Minnesota Stretching Crew with amateur teammate Brock Lesnar, while Charlie was pursuing his dream alongside brother Russ. After Russ tragically passed away and Brock got brought up as a singles competitor, WWE decided to throw Haas and Benjamin together as Team Angle following Shelton's brief solo run on Heat. With Olympic gold medalist and WWE champion Kurt Angle coaching them from ringside, Charlie and Shelton were thrown right into the fire, but thanks to their desire to learn and get better and being able to work nightly with the likes of Edge, Chris Benoit, the Guerreros, Rey Mysterio, and other talented vets, they rapidly improved and were soon legitimately one of the best tag teams in the business. In fact, so much so that the 2-time WWE Tag Team Champions felt confident branding themselves the world's greatest greatest tag team. Their later WWE reunion wasn't quite as fruitful, but their quality and work rate remained, while their post-WWE stay in Ring of Honor served as a timely reminder of their talent as a team. Number 51, the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov. Also known as the Foreign Legion, the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov preyed upon the jingoistic fears of American fans at the time. It didn't take all that long for the Iranian and Russian combination to become one of the most despised acts in WWE, nor did it take long for them to find success as a unit, the Foreign Legion beating the US Express for the tag team titles at the inaugural WrestleMania. The flag-waving and rotten renditions of the Soviet national anthem were enough to attract nuclear heat, with Sheik and Volkov not having to do too much once the bell actually rang. After their run with the belts was over, they had feuds and matches with the Bulldogs, Can-Am Connection, Young Stallions, Islanders, and other mid-level teams. The matches were solid, if often unspectacular, but the team was all about generating heat, and they had the crowd eating out of the palm of their hands. Sheik and Volkov were forced to disband after Sheik's 1987 drugs-related arrest and subsequent release, but really the act had run its course by that point anyway. Inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame separately in 2005, their time as the promotion's chief foreign menace team was a significant part of their individual legacies. Number 50, the Cosmic Cowboys. The Von Erichs were one of the greatest professional wrestling families of all time, with patriarch Fritz and his sons all achieving differing levels of success, most of which came in their own world-class promotion. When it comes to picking a standard tag team from the Von Erich boys, you would have to go with Kevin and Kerry, who were sometimes known as the Cosmic Cowboys. Because they were not only brothers, but also best friends, Kevin and Kerry had undeniable chemistry when competing together, something that, coupled with the Texas crowd's undying admiration for them, made for some very, very good angles, matches, and feuds. Naturally, their series of matches with the fabulous Freebirds stick out, but Kevin and Kerry also had a great series with the dynamic duo of Gino Hernandez and Chris Adams. Their championship haul included 3 WCCW tag titles and 2 NWA American tag titles, which went nicely alongside their accomplishments as singles and stable wrestlers. Number 49, Lex Luger and Sting. Best friends outside of the ring, Lex Luger and Sting were a star-studded main event act when put together inside of it. For a decade, the Stinger and the Total Package were one of the most popular duos in WCW, intermittently joining forces to put the rest of the promotion's teams on notice. Their best match as a team was undoubtedly their all-action blinder with the Steiner brothers from the first Super Brawl, but their combination of resilience, speed, strength, and charisma ensured almost every match was worth watching. Their most sustained run as a tag team came between Luger's re-emergence at the back end of 1995 and Sting going all emo and taking to the rafters in the fall of '96. It was such an interesting dynamic because Lex was a heel at the time, while his face-painted mate was a beloved babyface who refused to turn his back on his friend. They won the WCW Tag Team titles on the January 22nd, 1996 edition of Nitro by beating Harlem Heat, and over the course of the next 6 months that followed, defended them against a diverse range of teams like the Faces of Fear, the Steiners, the American Males, and more. Their work in WCW a couple of years later wasn't quite to the same standard, but that 96 run was pure magic. Number 48, the Lucha Brothers. The Lucha Brothers, or the Lucha Bros, or Los Lucha Bros, call them what you want. The simple fact is that they are brothers and they do lucha. In fact, they do lucha really, really well. Good lucha things all round. Masked siblings Penta El Zero Miedo and Rey Fenix began training on the same day and debuted on the same day, working on the Mexican indie circuit before getting their big break in the United States with PWG in 2015, initially as singles competitors before they took the tag division by storm. From there, their tag career took them to MLW, Impact, and various indies, as well as big shows in Mexico, and they usually win a title wherever they end up. Always spectacular and with an unmanufactured cool vibe about them, Penta and Phoenix are liable to drop jaws with their unmatched athleticism and state-of-the-art double-team moves. Phoenix is the more spectacular of the two, with Penta acting as more of an all-rounder, and they work seamlessly together, especially when matched up with like-minded teams who are happy to go balls out in their bid to steal the show. And steal the show is what the Lucha Brothers did on many occasions since they joined AEW, their matches with the Young Bucks in particular some of the most awe-inspiring in recent memory. With Penta now in WWE, it's surely just a matter of time before Phoenix joins him. And I can't bloody wait. Number 47, The Bar. Sheamus and Cesaro beat 7 shades out of each other during their Best of 7 series, during which they came to the realization, while probably concussed, that hey, I like to kick people in the face and you like to kick people in the face, so why don't we kick people in the face together? The Bar was born, and together the Celtic Warrior and Swiss Superman raised the bar as far as tag team wrestling in WWE was concerned at the time. It's no surprise that the two men worked so well together after their lengthy feud, but for a team that were clearly thrown together because WWE perhaps had nothing better to do with them as singles, they far exceeded expectations. Good to great matches with the Hardys, the Usos, and the Shield demonstrated their adaptability, and backstage decision makers were clearly happy with their work, considering the Bar were chosen to end the New Day's record-setting title reign. 4 tag titles on Raw and 1 on SmackDown was a canny haul for a team that always put the effort in and made sure that their opponents hit them back as hard as they hit them in bouts that displayed their heightened understanding of tag team psychology. They didn't raise the bar, they were the bar. Number 46, Masato Yoshino and Naruki Doi. While New Japan, All Japan, and Pro Wrestling Noah may be the promotions that most fans think of when it comes to Japanese wrestling, it's worth remembering that during the 2000s, Dragon Gate was one of the hottest companies in the entire world, making stars out of people like CIMA and Dragon Kid, while also giving a platform to up-and-coming international talent like Pac and Ricochet. Built around warring factions, Dragon Gate specialized in tag team and multi-man action, with the team of Masato Yoshino and Naruki Doi standing out as one of the best the promotion ever produced. Both were quick, but Yoshino might have been the fastest man alive, using that speed and combining it with Doi's power for some blistering tandem offense. True innovators, their concoctions looked like video game sequences come to life and helped them on their way to 2 Open the Twin Gate titles and 1 GHC Junior Heavyweight Tag Team Championship. Western fans got a small glimpse of their awesomeness when they briefly appeared in Ring of Honor and TNA, but that doesn't begin to scratch the surface on what they were able to accomplish in their native land. Number 45, the Mega Powers. The combination of Hulkamania and Macho Madness was one of the most powerful forces in WWE history. Once sworn enemies, Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage began to team up after the Hulkster came to the Macho Man's aid at the behest of Miss Elizabeth, saving him from a beatdown at the hands of the Honky Tonk Man and Hart Foundation. Though they teamed up for house shows and non-televised dark matches, their first on-camera match as a tag team took place in the main event of the inaugural SummerSlam, where they defeated the Mega Bucks. A feud with the Twin Towers resulted in the Mega Powers exploding and going against one another in the WrestleMania 5 headliner. They only had a few televised matches as a team, but each one was significant and did big business. Their combination of showmanship, charisma, and popularity could hardly hope to be matched. And that's why it was no surprise that WCW revived the team, initially as the Mega Maniacs in the mid-90s. They were involved in some utter nonsense, yes, but there was no denying that they still had appeal as they headlined pay-per-views, TV shows, and other specials. Ooh yeah, dig it, brother! Number 44, Kenta Kobashi and Mitsuharu Misawa. Individually, both Kenta Kobashi and Mitsuharu Misawa could lay claim to being the greatest professional wrestler of all time. Together, they are also in the conversation for best tag team ever, especially if you're judging based on in-ring contributions alone. The two graduates of the notoriously difficult All Japan Pro Wrestling Dojo began teaming in 1990 and continued to tag regularly up until 1997. In that time, they amassed a CV of 5-star matches that would make Kenny Omega blush. Two-time All Japan Tag Champs, Kobashi and Misawa produced belters with a number of teams, but their best work was opposite the Holy Demon Army of Toshiaki Kawada and Akira Taue. These 4 pillars helped popularize the King's Road style and continually pushed the limits in long punishing matches featuring plenty of stiff strikes, suplexes, and fighting spirits. Other teams that Kobashi and Misawa, alternatively known as the Super Generation Army, scrapped with included Johnny Ace and Steve Williams, and Giant Baba and Stan Hansen. Whoever they were stood opposite, fans knew that they were likely to witness an all-out war. In fact, fans still marvel at the physicality on display in matches that retain their power decades later. Number 43, The Outsiders. Following a few better left forgotten tag team matches as Oz and Diamond Stud in WCW, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash were paired together on a string of non-televised house shows while wrestling for WWE as Diesel and Razor Ramon. Best buds outside the ring, their natural chemistry was on full display when they met up with each other in WCW. Presented as an invading force, the Outsiders ran roughshod over the WCW roster, leading to the formation of the New World Order with Hulk Hogan. While the bigger picture of the NWO's interests was usually the priority, Hall and Nash were a regular presence in the WCW tag division and had notable rivalries and matches with the likes of Harlem Heat, the Faces of Fear, and the Steiners. They had a good routine worked out, with Hall acting as the cocky workhorse while Nash was the cool muscle that backed him up. In just a couple of short years, they racked up 6 WCW tag title reigns. Regrettably, the team were unable to recapture former glories after splitting up, mainly due to Hall's personal problems, even though they got the band back together in WWE and TNA for what proved to be short runs. That said, when they were on, they were too sweet and major stars during one of the industry's hottest periods. Number 42, The Brothers of Destruction. Beginning as the fiercest of rivals, kayfabe brothers The Undertaker and Kane eventually started teaming up. They just had to get over a lot of baggage, you know? It was in the early 2000s, when Taker dropped the whole dead man persona in favor of the American badass, that the team really began their dominance. Such was the strength of their unholy union that they became one of the rare twosomes to headline a pay-per-view, taking on the two-man power trip of Steve Austin and Triple H in a winner-take-all match at Backlash 2001. They weren't without their problems and were guilty at times of completely snuffing their opponents out in lieu of showing any vulnerability, but they were over, and WWE could consistently put them back together even though they were routinely at odds with one another. They don't have an extensive list of classic matches and are responsible for 1 or 2 stinkers, but the Brothers of Destruction weren't really about putting on a scientific back and forth contest. They were 2 performers who knew their gimmicks and knew how to get over and stay over, creating excitement for their matches even if the result was rarely ever in doubt. Number 41, The Bushwhackers. Butch Miller and Luke Williams first started teaming together in their native New Zealand back in 1966. For the next 36 years, they would continue to globetrot under various guises, wrestling in the US, Canada, Japan, Puerto Rico, and elsewhere, winning countless titles as they went about it. During their days in the territories, Miller and Williams, as either the Kiwis or the sheep herders, drew big crowds and got big reactions too, as a pair of brawlers who weren't afraid to get bloody. They didn't do a lot, but what they did do seemed to work, and their services were in high demand. 20 years into their careers, Butch and Luke made the move to WWE and became the Bushwhackers, a comedy babyface act that employed head-licking, arm-swinging, and other antics in place of proper, wrestling. Not to everyone's taste, that's for sure, but the Bushwhackers were nonetheless very popular, especially with children. The Bushwhackers were just memorable and fun, and Williams and Miller as a team had a 36-year run spanning different countries, companies, and styles. That is simply incredible longevity, and they are fondly remembered by longtime fans to this very day. Number 40, The Crusher and the Bruiser. With names like that, do you think these lads were out there putting on wrist locks or what? Hell no, they didn't. The Crusher and Dick the Bruiser basically beat the hell out of anybody dumb enough to step in their way. The kayfabe cousins were initially heroes in the AWA territory, preferring a brawling style that saw them both dish out and take a lot of punishment, often in blood-filled steel cage matches. Part of their gimmick was, if they felt they hadn't bloodied up their opponents enough, they would start punching each other afterwards. Must be fun to have friends. They won the AWA tag titles together 5 times, as well as the WWA tag titles 4 times. Of course, Dick the Bruiser was the promoter of that particular territory, so that's hardly a surprise. It's also not a surprise since the duo, who teamed off and on for the best part of 2 decades, were big draws and generated healthy business in the Midwest, while also venturing to Japan for tours where they took on teams such as Giant Baba and Antonio Inoki. Just a couple of tough old bastards who were as mean as they looked and delivered exactly what fans expected. Number 39, La Pareja del Terror. As mentioned earlier in our countdown, Eddie Guerrero and El Hijo del Santo teamed in the 90s as La Pareja Atomica in honor of their fathers Gory Guerrero and El Santo. It was good for Eddie's career, but things really kicked into overdrive when he turned on his masked partner and sided with Art Barr to form La Pareja del Terror, aka the Pair of Terror. They soon changed their name to Los Gringos Locos to go with a beefed up stable of the same name, really pushing the fact that they were Americans, with Eddie being Mexican-American, coming to terrorize wrestlers south of the border. Latino Heat and Love Machine were irrepressible in the ring, and despite not initially liking each other personally, grew to become friends behind the scenes on their way to being one of the most complete tag teams in the industry. Eddie was the master of the group, displaying a hybrid style that incorporated what he had mastered from wrestling in Mexico, Japan, and the US. Meanwhile, Art provided the charisma and over-the-top theatrics designed to generate maximum heat, and they were one of the most hated duos in Lucha Libre history. Their greatest bout, a hair versus mask match lost to El Hijo del Santo and Octagon at the When Worlds Collide pay-per-view, turned out to be their last, as Barr passed away just a couple of weeks later, before the team were due to debut in ECW. Truly, what could have been? Number 38, Antonino Rocca and Miguel Perez. Back in the 1950s, when the company was still called Capital Wrestling Corporation, one of WWE's biggest draws was the tag team of Antonino Rocca and Miguel Perez. Rocca had been a single star in his own right when he began tagging with Puerto Rican Perez. The two men, who were early adopters of a more high-flying style, were hugely popular with Latino fans, and between 1957 and 1960 parlayed that popularity into headlining Madison Square Garden a whopping 28 times, often selling out the world's most famous arena. The first recognized holders of the NWA United States Tag Team titles, Rocca and Perez held the belts for a year and clashed with teams like the Grahams, the Fabulous Kangaroos, and more. They rekindled their team in the mid-1970s in Puerto Rico, where they held the World Wrestling Council's North American tag titles. People tend to forget about Antonino Rocca and Miguel Perez's team because, to be honest, their peak was so long ago and there isn't a great deal of footage to draw from, but their success speaks for itself, and they deserve to be in the conversation when it comes to great WWE tag teams for their ability to drive business alone. Number 37, Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson. For many fans, Pat Patterson was known as either the first ever WWE Intercontinental Champion, which he won in a totally legit tournament in Rio de Janeiro, or as a bumbling Attitude-era stooge. Those fans should probably know about Patterson's career before that, in particular his groundbreaking tag team with Ray Stevens. Ray the Crippler and Pretty Boy Pat had their heyday in San Francisco during the 1960s while working for promoter Roy Shire. Known as the Blonde Bombers, the two men were heat magnets known for their ability to take the lowliest guys on the card and get a great match out of them. According to Patterson, the two men worked so well together because Stevens always wanted to have fun, whether it was in the ring, in the dressing room, or in town after the show. So not only was he first rate when the bell rang, but he was a joy to be around outside of work, and it helped their chemistry a great deal. Big bumping heels in an era where workers didn't typically take quite as many bumps, the Blonde Bombers held the NWA tag titles on 2 occasions for a combined 700 days, and over a decade later had a 256-day reign as AWA tag champs. Number 36, The Rockers. Initially dismissed as a rip-off of the Rock and Roll Express, the Midnight Rockers quickly established themselves as their own entity by rapidly rising through the ranks in the AWA. Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty were one of the most exciting tag teams in the world, their fun-loving pretty boy personas attracting much female attention in the promotion and beyond. An initial run in WWE was cut short due to their hard partying ways, but after some time away in various promotions, they were brought back for a second bite of the cherry. This time they behaved themselves, well, at least behaved enough not to get fired after 3 weeks, and showed their talent in a series of tremendous matches with the Brainbusters. Adept at getting sympathy with their bumping and selling, they were ideal opponents for larger teams in the land of the Giants, yet were also able to show a little more when put in with the likes of the Hart Foundation and Orient Express. An unrecognized win over the Hart Foundation was as close as they got to getting their hands on WWE Tag Team Gold, and after backstage issues, they eventually split and feuded. The Heartbreak Kid's singles career has eclipsed his Rockers doubles work, yes, but they really did consistently entertain between the ropes and were one of the best teams of a golden era in WWE Tag Team Wrestling. Number 35, the Motor City Machine Guns. Not dissimilar to the Rockers, the Motor City Machine Guns were a pair of lightning-fast, high-flying technicians that were way ahead of their time. Starting life in Japan and on the American indie scene, the MCMG gained significantly more attention when they became a regular team in TNA. Two of the standouts of the X Division, watching their evolution while they teamed together was simply a joy. Their series of matches with Team 3D and Beer Money took them to the next level, but it didn't matter what the assignment was. If Shelley and Saban were in the ring, you knew you were at the very least going to see an exciting match with some silky smooth teamwork. They just had, and continue to have for that matter, the sort of natural chemistry that you just can't manufacture, and their work in TNA, Ring of Honor, and New Japan is eminently watchable. They've won tag gold in all three of those promotions, and now WWE too, yet 2 decades into their time as a team are still producing work of such a high quality. Whether in straight wrestling or gimmick matches, the Machine Guns will never fail to pull out something that makes you stop and say, how the hell did they do that? Respected and admired by the new generation, I have a feeling their influence is going to be felt for a long time to come. Number 34, the Miracle Violence Connection. Well, professional wrestling tag team names don't come much better than this, do they? And professional wrestlers don't come much more intimidating than Steve Dr. Death Williams and Terry Bam Bam Gordy. Two super tough, barrel-chested bruisers who earned their reputations overseas in Japan, Gordy and Williams first briefly teamed together for Jim Crockett Promotions in 1987, having a series of matches with Dick Murdoch and Eddie Gilbert. They reunited 3 years later in All Japan, where they became a top act, winning the company's world tag titles on 5 occasions, as well as their annual tag team tournament in back-to-back years. They had classic, punishing matches with everyone who dared test their mettle. At the same time, the Miracle Violence Connection were brought into WCW, where they had some typically snug knockdown dragouts with the Steiners, as well as teams like Barry Windham and Dustin Rhodes. They finished as a team in All Japan in '94, breaking up when Gordy left the promotion. They reunited for 1 match in ECW 2 years later, doing the honors for the Eliminators. Two intimidating hosses who went about their business with a no-nonsense approach, Gordy and Williams were great individually, but practically unbeatable when they were together and on their A-game. Number 33, the Fabulous Ones. One of, if not the first, pretty boy tag team in wrestling, the Fabulous Ones were pushed from the off in the Continental Wrestling Association via a series of exceptionally 1980s promotional videos that showed the sharp-dressed men frolicking together down at the barn, in the bath, and in the bedroom. Just dudes being dudes, that's all. The vids might have been a little naff, but nothing about Steve Kern and Sweet Stan Lane's work was. The top hats and sequin tuxedos, however, definitely were. They were just great in the ring, knowing exactly what to do and when to do it, while their charisma and sex appeal got them over massively with the female fans. They quickly rose to the top and bagged the Southern Tag titles, their first of many championships, while having a legendarily bloody rivalry with the Sheepherders. They enjoyed most of their success in Memphis, but traveled to other territories including Mid-Atlantic and Championship Wrestling from Florida. Fast-paced and versatile, the Fabulous Ones never seemed to have any trouble fitting in and worked well with a variety of different styles of teams, from the Road Warriors to the Fantastics. Influential with their gimmick, they drew money and were prolific during their peak. Lane and Kern deserve to be much more than just a meme, even if those saucy videos will forever be ripe for ridicule. Number 32, Ten Koji. As much as the likes of Tanahashi, Nakamura, and Okada deserve credit for New Japan's renaissance in the 2010s, workhorses like Hiroyoshi Tenzan and Satoshi Kojima deserve equal amounts of credit for keeping things ticking along during the dark before the dawn. The two men came together to form a team back in 1998 after Tenzan's regular partner Masahiro Chono was injured, winning the IWGP Tag Team titles in just their 3rd outing, inside the Tokyo Dome no less. Thus began the first of 6 runs with New Japan's doubles titles, which they held for a combined total of 929 days, with their longest reign clocking in at 430. Tenzan and Kojima played off each other really well and had complementary styles. Tenzan was a little tank of a man who bulldozed hard-nosed opponents, while Kojima incorporated more pure athleticism, and they both hit very, very hard. They also had single-star pedigree, with each man claiming multiple world titles to their credit, which only added to their prestige as a tag team. As well as their many tag titles, including a reign as NWA Tag Champs, Tenkoji, sometimes spelled Tenkozi, also won 2 G1 Tag League and 2 World's Strongest Tag Determination League tournaments. Eventually, the battered Warhorses stepped aside to let other younger teams take the spotlight, but they were still fun to watch in undercard bouts thanks to their familiar chemistry. Number 31, the New Age Outlaws. Going nowhere fast while saddled with a couple of dead-end gimmicks, Rockabilly and the Roadie were thrown together and tasked with either getting over or getting wished the best in their future endeavors. Developing some serious, dare I say it, attitude, the New Age Outlaws caught on quick and before long had beaten the Legion of Doom to win their first of 6 WWE Tag Team titles. While their matches were never exactly in that top tier, they didn't really have to be. That's not to say they were bad in the ring, on the contrary, they knew exactly what they needed to do whether they were babyfaces or heels and had solid matches with a lot of teams. As members of D-Generation X, they were one of the most popular acts on WWE television at a time that the company was red hot and only getting hotter. Their shtick, especially their pre-match catchphrase-filled promo, was so over and they were so strong as characters that they didn't necessarily need to have a 5-star outing to get the desired reaction or draw interest. A post-WWE run in TNA as the James Gang / Voodoo Kin Mafia was not their finest hour, but they were able to come back to WWE and have a successful nostalgia run to end their time as a team. And now you know, so your ass doesn't need to call somebody. Number 30, Stan Hansen and Bruiser Brody. If you looked across the ring and saw Stan Hansen, you would run. If you looked across the ring and saw Bruiser Brody, you would run. If you looked across the ring and saw both Stan Hansen and Bruiser Brody, you would probably just start crying and hope you soon woke up from what must surely be a terrible nightmare. Football-playing pals from West Texas University, Hansen and Brody first teamed up for the NWA Tri-State Territory in the mid-1970s, back when Brody was wrestling under his real name of Frank Goodish. They won the promotion's tag titles 3 times and subsequently went to the WWF for a brief run. When the Lariat and King Kong hooked up again in All Japan in the early 1980s, they were an instant force to be reckoned with. They just missed out on winning the 82 Real World Tag League, losing to the Funks in the final, but bounced back to win the tournament in 1983. Hansen and Brody were a couple of hard-hitting, unpredictable madmen who struck fear into the hearts of Japanese fans and opponents. They were habitual headliners, making a ton of money while being protected by All Japan booker Giant Baba and having standout matches with Baba and various partners, as well as Terry and Dory and other teams. Would no doubt be considered a top 10 tag team had their run lasted longer. Number 29, Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood. Ricky Steamboat had success in the NWA's tag ranks before he linked up with Jay Youngblood, winning the Mid-Atlantic and NWA World Tag titles with Paul Jones. Steamboat and Jones were a good team, no doubt, but the Dragon found a kindred spirit in Youngblood, who very much wrestled in the Ricky Steamboat mold. The keys to their success were speed and selling. They would use leapfrogs, drop kicks, chops, and arm drags to wear down and disorient their opponents, making frequent tags so that they could remain fresh. When the heel inevitably managed to cut one of them off, that's when the world-class selling kicked in, building incredible sympathy and anticipation for the high-flying hot tag. It was simple stuff, yes, but the simple stuff typically tends to work well when it's done well, and few were better at portraying young, clean-cut babyfaces. They managed to score the NWA World Tag Team titles 5 times, holding them for a decent 347 days. They had some gripping matches with the Briscoes and Don Canodal and Sergeant Slaughter in Mid-Atlantic, and also did very well during a tour of All Japan. They may have been a team for longer had Youngblood's substance abuse issues not persuaded Steamboat to go solo. But when both men were on song, you would struggle to find a better territorial babyface tag team. Number 28, FTR. FTR, or Bald and Hair as they are commonly known, are one of the great contemporary throwback tag teams. Dax Harwood and Cash Wheeler, then known as Dash Wilder and Scott Dawson, were longtime friends before they decided to team up while trying to get noticed in NXT back in the mid-2010s. The North Carolina natives were encouraged to make a go of it by Dusty Rhodes, despite the fact that their smaller stature and southern roots would no doubt be a turn-off to many WWE decision-makers, and they went about honing their act, which prioritized believability and an old-school approach while still meeting modern expectations when it came to work rates. Their work in NXT was almost flawless, and they had phenomenal matches with just about everyone they encountered, particularly on the Black and Gold brand's takeover events. The two-time NXT Tag Team Champions' fortunes on the main roster were mixed, but they were still good for 2 reigns as Raw Tag Champs and 1 reign as SmackDown Tag Champs, doing their best to produce compelling matches in difficult circumstances. Their post-WWE work in AEW and Ring of Honor has ensured their legacy is as solid as their ring work, as they've added the AEW, ROH, AAA, and IWGP tag titles to their list of accomplishments. And they did it all with just fists, no flips. Number 27, the Nasty Boys. With their mullets, protruding bellies, and faces only their mothers could love, the Nasty Boys very much fit their name. Inside the ring, Brian Knobbs and Jerry Sags very much wrestled to fit their antisocial, almost punk appearance, specializing in violent, hardcore brawls. They spent their first few years in the AWA and Florida Championship Wrestling before joining WCW for a brief spell. Their series of bruising bouts with the Steiner brothers caught the attention of WWE, who duly snapped them up. Just a few months after their debuts, the Nasty Boys beat the Hart Foundation to win the WWE Tag Team titles at WrestleMania 7. Their one and only run was ended at the hands of the Legion of Doom, but the Nasties continued to be a welcome presence on WWE TV before being released in 1993. A second spell in WCW proved far more fruitful than their first, as they became 3-time tag team champs and wrestled just about every other team on the roster until Sags retired due to injury in 1997. After that, they would periodically reunite for this or that, including an unlikely return in TNA, though their best days were long behind them. In their prime though, the Nasty Boys were stiff and sloppy, yet nonetheless engrossing as well as being simply gross. Number 26, the Wild Samoans. Part of the massive Samoan dynasty, Afa and Sika helped bring the Anoa'i family to prominence during the 1980s. They got their start in Stampede Wrestling and worked for various territories, gaining some seasoning before being signed by WWE in 1979. They enjoyed 2 tag team title reigns before taking a break to go to Georgia and Mid-South before returning for a 3rd and final WWE tag title reign. Presented as simple savages who grunted and ate raw fish, the Wild Samoans didn't do anything fancy in the ring, but they brought an air of believability to their work in spite of their somewhat cartoonish personas. They didn't say much, since they had Captain Lou Albano to do that for them, but showed their charisma through their facial expressions and actions in the ring, and were a staple of WWE cards in the mid to late 80s, having some darn strong matches with Dick Murdoch and Adrian Adonis prior to leaving the promotion. Post-WWE, Afa and Sika focused mainly on training the next generation and promoting, with Sika returning for a singles run. All told, they held 21 different tag team titles during their long run together. Inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2007, the Wild Samoans were one of the most rugged and intimidating tag teams in wrestling history and set the standard for the family members who followed. Number 25, the Minnesota Wrecking Crew. Initially consisting of Gene Anderson and kayfabe brother Lars, the Minnesota Wrecking Crew became Gene and Ole starting in 1969. The Andersons were all business after the bell had sounded, favoring a strong, believable style that played to their strengths as technically sound, rough-looking heels. Throughout the 70s, the crew competed in different territories, winning numerous titles in Georgia and Mid-Atlantic as they helped to define the art of tag team wrestling. What separated them from the rest was the fact that they stuck together for so long during a time when tag teams typically comprised of 2 solo performers who had been thrown together for a short-term stint, with Gene and Ole holding what would become the WCW tag team titles 7 times for a combined 977 days. The Gopher State Grapplers also helped to establish the strategy of isolating one member of the opposition and working on a specific body part, something that has endured for decades, their deliberate style being so engrossing that it captured the attention of fans and they didn't get stale despite them often staying in the same territory for a lengthy period of time. Gene Kane retired in 1981 and was later replaced by Ole's fake cousin Arn, as the two then became members of the original Four Horsemen. Number 24, the Funks. Consisting of two former NWA World's Heavyweight Champions, the combination of Terry and Dory Funk Jr. was one of the very best of the 1970s and 80s. On home soil, the Funks, who spent their first decade or so working for their father Dory Sr.'s Amarillo-based Western States territory, won the NWA World Tag Team Championships 3 times. The more methodical Dory and the, well, more certifiably insane Terry did have great matches in the US and were successful, but that success paled in comparison to what they experienced as one of the top foreign tag teams in all Japan at a time when the company had some of the best tag teams in the world on its roster. Matches with Hanson and Brody and Abdullah the Butcher and the Sheik are the stuff of legend, and they drew a boatload of yen for the promotion. They already had a ton of tours to their name and had become icons in the Far East when they stopped by WWE for a run in 1986, which included a match at WrestleMania 2. Their WWE work may have looked mild in comparison to the epic bloody brawls they were having in Japan, but it showed their versatility and adaptability, key traits that helped them get over and win titles wherever they went. Their legacy will live on forever. Forever, 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 forever. Number 23, the Assassins. Top draws pretty much everywhere they went in the southeastern United States, the Assassins battled the top babyface teams in whatever territory they were in. They complemented each other well and captured umpteen sets of tag titles on their travels, including the NWA Georgia tag titles a record-breaking 12 times. Next to Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson, the Assassins were generally considered the best and most effective heel team of their era. A dearth of footage makes it hard to really appraise their ring work, but by most accounts they knew exactly what they were doing in the ring and were able to help disguise their opponent's weaknesses effectively. They were also strong promo men, eschewing the "let's all get angry and shout a lot" style that many heels of the day preferred in favor of a more measured approach. Renesto, who became a booker as he edged towards retirement, scripted the breakup of the team by voluntarily unmasking and turning babyface, allowing Hamilton to at first go the singles route before he reformed the Assassins with different partners. As for the original pairing, no less than Jim Ross once labeled them the best tag team he ever saw. By God! Number 22, the Fabulous Kangaroos. G'day mates, it's time to hop like a kangaroo back in time and look at an Australian team that really perfected the art of tag wrestling before it was even really a thing. The Fabulous Kangaroos, Al Costello and Roy Hefferman, went to 11 on the We Are Australian gimmick amplifier, carrying boomerangs, wearing bush hats, and coming to the ring to the sound of Waltzing Matilda. This made them quite possibly the first tag team to use entrance music. They made their debuts for Stu Hart's Stampede Wrestling in the late 1950s, gaining popularity before traveling the wider United States, causing near riots and winning gold as they went. Effective heels, the Kangaroos popularized many double team moves and were one of the first duos to become bona fide headliners. As was common in the era, they moved around from territory to territory to avoid overexposure. They really drew houses too, including selling out Madison Square Garden with Miguel Perez and Antonino Rocca, their manager Wild Red Berry helping to talk punters into the building. The first tag team inducted into the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame, it's perhaps difficult to compare them to teams from more modern eras, but the Fabulous Kangaroos had a proven track record of success and innovation that, at the very least, puts them in the conversation for best ever. Number 21, Harlem Heat. Brothers Booker T and Stevie Ray got their start in Texas during the late 1980s, working for the Western Wrestling Alliance, Global, and on the Indies before signing with WCW. Cole and Kane, as they were initially known, showed up in Turnertown in June of '93, and by September, they were already wrestling in the main event of the Fall Brawl pay-per-view. Big, athletic, and possessing a mean streak, Harlem Heat had a decent first year, but really took off when they went back to their more well-known names and brought in Sister Sherry Martel as their manager. One of the best teams of the 90s, Harlem Heat won the WCW Tag Team titles a record-setting 10 times and had memorable feuds and matches with a wide range of duos, including the Nasty Boys, Steiners, Outsiders, and others. Booker was the workhorse of the group and the one who eventually became a single star as the decade wore on, but they worked together extremely well whether they were babyfaces or heels. Harlem Heat broke up in 2000, allowing Booker to climb the ranks and end up as a true main event player in WCW and WWE. For a long time, however, they were the go-to team for WCW and built a legacy that saw them inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2019. And that is something I can most certainly dig. Sucker! Number 20, the Briscoe brothers. Freddie Joe and Floyd Gerald Briscoe, aka Jack and Jerry, excelled in amateur wrestling at Oklahoma State University before turning pro in the 1960s. Jack was the first to step into the squared circle and was a single star in his own right when he began to team with his own flesh and blood in the early 70s. In over a decade of tagging together, the Briscoes won a ton of tag titles, including the NWA Florida Tag Team Championships on 7 occasions and the NWA World Tag Titles 3 times. Altogether, they won an unprecedented 20 tag team championships in their almost 2-decade run. Big stars in the Sunshine State, Jack and Jerry did venture to other territories including Georgia and Mid-Atlantic. Able to dominate their opponents on the mat at will, the Briscoes favored a technical style but were able to adapt to their opponents, whether they be the Funks, who they have many classics with, or the likes of Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood. A classy team who were always on the same page, Jack and Jerry were teaming together in WWE when Jack decided to up and quit the business completely. They were inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2008, with Jack, a 2-time NWA World's Heavyweight Champion, passing away 2 years later. Number 19, the Steiner brothers. Sometimes it really is as simple as getting 2 freakishly strong, athletically superior amateur wrestling standout brothers with a mean streak and letting them loose. Of course, you have to find them first, and they don't come around too often. 2 total and utter forces of nature, Rick and Scott Steiner set about their task with reckless abandon, suplexing, stretching, and slamming their hapless foes around at will. First coming to prominence in WCW in the late 80s, the Steiners didn't take long to establish themselves as one of the top tag teams of the 90s, both in the United States and overseas for New Japan. Explosive, unpredictable, and seemingly uncontrollable, they really could have a great match with anyone willing to sacrifice their bodies for the privilege. I say willing as if anyone had a choice when in there with the Michigan-born jocks. A 1-year stint in WWE was a bit of a disappointment, but Rick and Scott picked up where they left off in New Japan and WCW before they split up and became solo acts in the late 90s. They tagged together again infrequently thereafter, usually in Japan or on the Indies, as well as a few matches for TNA, but there was really nothing more they could accomplish as a team anyway. Really, the Hall of Famers had done it all, winning countless titles and having some true classics the world over along the way. Number 18, the British Bulldogs. After initially feuding together, cousins the Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy Smith began teaming in Canada's Stampede territory and for New Japan before ditching them for rivals All Japan. An enviable mix of speed, power, precision, and aggression, the Bulldogs wrestled a style that was light years ahead of just about every other tag team around at the time. Dynamite and Davey Boy headed over to WWE when Vince McMahon bought out Stampede and feuded with the Hart Foundation, the 2 teams putting on a series of groundbreaking matches that made the slow and plodding punch and kick fests on the rest of the card look passé in comparison. The career high point for the Bulldogs came at WrestleMania 2, where, with Ozzy Osbourne in their corner, they took the tag titles from the Dream Team. Their reign was solid, featuring rematches with the Dream Team as well as the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov, but came to an unfortunate end when Dynamite suffered a debilitating back injury and they had to drop the belts to the Hart Foundation. While Dynamite was never completely the same after the injury, the Bulldogs continued to team together and had one last great post-WWE run in All Japan before splitting acrimoniously. Based on the quality of their ring work and collection of superior matches with teams of varying styles, the Bulldogs are a top 20 tag team, whether they want to be or not. Number 17, the Valiant Brothers. Arguably the top tag team of the 1970s, Storyline Brothers Handsome Jimmy and Luscious Johnny Valentine provided a sports entertainment flair that was rare at the time. With their bleach blonde hair and flamboyant entrance, the Valiant Brothers were easy to despise and did everything they could in the ring to incite audiences. Not that their act was simply comprised of cheap heat shortcuts, of course, as the Valiants could also mat wrestle and tell a story in the ring while playing to the crowd. The four-time WWE Tag Team Champions also had a 370-day run with the WWE Tag Team titles and represented the Georgia and Florida territories as champs as well. They were flashy and flamboyant and, in a lot of ways, ahead of their time. They had chemistry with many of the teams they squared off with their matches against Tony Garea and Dean Ho sticking out as being particularly action-packed and elevating the status of WWE's tag division. Button-pushing and rather OTT during an era of more measured restraints, the Valiant brothers would have fit in seamlessly in many future decades. As it is, their run came to an end in 1980 and they were inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 1996. Number 16, the Blackjacks. Though they had distinguished singles careers in their own right, native Texans Blackjack Mulligan and Blackjack Lanza left a strong legacy of one of the most rough, rugged, and successful teams of their era. At 6'9" and 6'5" respectively, and clocking in at close to 600 pounds combined, the Blackjacks were an imposing heel unit that feuded with the top stars and added to their title collection wherever they went, catching the eye with their matching trunks, boots, cowboy hats, and moustaches. Their trophy haul included the NWA American and Texas and WWF tag titles, which they won while being managed first by the legendary Bobby Heenan and then the also legendary Captain Lou Albano. Surly rule breakers who didn't exactly care about finesse, the Blackjacks were the sort of team that would just bully their opponents, using their size, strength, and toughness to grind other teams down. Despite their size and reputation, Mulligan and Lanza weren't afraid to bump and sell for their typically smaller opponents and knew how and when to build heat, riling fans up into a frenzy. They split in 1984, after which Mulligan had a singles run and Lanza became a WWE road agent. The team was honoured by the new Blackjacks in 1997, which included Mulligan's son Barry Windham, but were then honoured properly with a WWE Hall of Fame induction in 2006. Number 15, the Holy Demon Army. These men, Toshiaki Kawada and Akira Taue, hit hard. Like, very, very hard. The most dominant team in all Japan pro wrestling history, the Holy Demon Army ruled the 90s, winning the promotion's world tag titles 6 times and the tag league in consecutive years. Along the way, they had some of the most gripping and hard-hitting, did I mention they hit hard, matches ever. Their already discussed series with Kobashi and Misawa setting a standard that very few would even attempt to meet. Once embroiled in a bitter feud with one another, Taue and Kawada had ridiculous chemistry as a unit, and while perhaps not on the same level as single stars that Kobashi and Misawa were, they were a stronger team overall. A lot of wrestlers strive to have epic matches, but very few in history were able to do it as naturally as the Holy Demon Army did it time and time again. Number 14, the Briscoes. While they were no relation to Jack and Jerry, Jay and Mark Briscoe with an E honoured the name by becoming one of the very best tag teams of their, or in fact any era. And they did it all without ever signing a contract with a major American organisation. Starting out in their teens, the Briscoes paid dues on the Northeast independent scene, their standout performances for groups like Combat Zone Wrestling, ECWA, and Jersey All Pro, leading to an upstart promotion called Ring of Honor. It was in Ring of Honor that Jay and Mark would have arguably their best matches, though they also had more than their fair share overseas in Japan and for other indies like Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. Invariably winning gold wherever they went, Dem Boys became so well-rounded as performers as the years wore on and could have a great match with any team of any style. As characters, their sketches and promos were also highly entertaining, as they had personality to go along with their skill on the mat. Sadly, Jay would pass away in an automobile accident in January of 2023, a little over a month after the Briscoes had defeated FTR in a classic double dog collar match at Ring of Honor Final Battle 2022. A superstar worker until the very end, Jay's legacy is carried on by his brother, who continues to be one of the best and most consistent performers in the biz. Number 13, the Fabulous Freebirds. Hailing from Bad Street, USA, the Fabulous Freebirds were innovators not just with their sports entertainment shenanigans and use of custom-made rock music for their entrance, but also for the fact that this tag team were actually a trio. The Freebirds, that's Terry Bam Bam Gordy, Michael P.S. Hayes, and Buddy Roberts, instituted the Freebird rule after winning the tag titles in Georgia Championship Wrestling, enabling any 2 members of the trio to defend the belts whenever they saw fit. Each man brought something to the fold, with Gordy acting as the imposing brawler, Buddy the workhorse who bumped like a pinball, and Hayes the Well, he was just Michael Hayes, wasn't he? The Freebirds' greatest success came in the Texas-based World Class promotion, where they embarked on a lengthy and lucrative feud with the Lone Star State's favourite sons, the Von Erich brothers. They won a plethora of tag and singles titles in WCCW and added a fourth member, Jimmy Jam Garvin, who became the regular partner of Hayes, including for a title-laden run in WCW years later. Flashy, charismatic, cocky, the fabulous Freebirds talked the talk and walked the walk, becoming one of the best heel teams of all time while causing chaos inside the ring and out. Roberts and Gordy are sadly gone, but the Freebirds changed the tag game forever and were inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2016. Number 12, Demolition. If Vince McMahon couldn't get the Road Warriors, well, he was just going to create his own, damn it. Thus, Demolition was born. And while Axe and Smash may have been derided as Hawk and Animal rip-offs initially due to their look and in-ring style, it is a credit to Barry Darsow and Bill Eadie that they managed to rise above the critics and establish a legacy of their very own. Marching to the ring to some pretty badass theme music, Demolition's Smash Mouth style was a good counterpoint to many of the WWE tag teams of the time, and they didn't waste much time establishing their dominance. Axe, as the more experienced member, was the general that held things together, but Smash more than held his own, and together they developed their act on the road against teams like the Killer Bees, Can-Am Connection, and the British Bulldogs. Three-time WWE Tag Team Champions, Demolition's first reign is one of the longest in company history, clocking in at 478 days, while they hold the record for the longest combined days with the old WWE tag titles at 698 days. This made it feel like their big run was longer than it actually was, but Demolition went out on top before they became stale, and the addition of Crush really wasn't as bad as some people like to make it out. With their unique look, memorable title reigns, and consistently good, if not great matches, Demolition demolished the competition and should have been put in the Hall of Fame years ago. Number 11, the Young Bucks. Once accused of killing the business, Nick and Matt Jackson have undoubtedly changed it. Whether that's for the better may depend on your opinion of the Young Bucks, but you cannot argue with their success and influence. The brothers grew up wrestling in their backyard before catching attention with their risk-taking performances on the indies, most notably gaining a cult following in PWG. Once they had won over the SoCal faithful, the Young Bucks, who dressed like the Rockers and wrestled like the Hardys, began to see their bookings increase, taking them to Japan for Dragon Gate. Then, right as they were getting this important experience, TNA hired them and rebranded them as Generation Me, a misstep that really did set them back right as they were beginning to break out. Well, once Max and Jeremy had left TNA, they didn't look back, and during the 2010s became the kings of tag wrestling on the indies for PWG and Ring of Honor. As Bullet Club members, the Bucks became incredibly important in the resurgence of New Japan as well. Wherever they were, the consistency of their ring work remained, and they really were adept at not just putting on great matches, but building their brand without the backing of a mainstream organization. Founding members of AEW, Nicholas and Matthew have shown their versatility in recent years with a heel run that has cemented them as an all-time tag team. You might love to hate them, but you can't deny that. Actually, you can, comment section down below. Number 10, the Brainbusters. Various members of the different incarnations of the Four Horsemen stable teamed together in straight tag matches over the years, but the pairing of Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson stood out as superior to the rest. Similar to the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, they were masters of using psychology, cutting the ring in half, and working on a specific body part, but Tully was an upgrade on Oli when it came to athleticism and charisma. They were smart, often bending the rules to their limit without technically breaking them, and helping to build sympathy for the babyface in peril. And Blanchard and Anderson had no shortage of hot babyfaces to work with in mid-80s NWA, putting on masterclasses with the Fantastics, the Road Warriors, and Sting, and whoever his partner of the week was. Arn and Tully went to WWE in the late 80s, where they were managed by Bobby Heenan and became the first team to win the NWA and WWE tag titles. They didn't have as many excellent matches, but their bouts with the Rockers and the Hart Foundation were nothing to sniff at. Their run ended at Titan, but their influence can clearly still be seen in modern tag teams like FTR, their timeless style in no danger of going out of style. Number 9, Edge and Christian. It is amazing to think that considering how well regarded they are and how much they accomplished together, Edge and Christian's main run as a team really only lasted a couple of years. But oh my, what a couple of years they were. Childhood friends Adam Copeland and Jay Rezzo broke into the business and did some tag matches on the indie scene before joining up again as members of the Brood in WWE during the late 90s. After ditching Gangrel, Edge and Christian set about becoming one of the premier tag teams of the Attitude Era. Able to seamlessly switch from comedic heels to fiery babyfaces depending on the storyline and situation, E&C were a solid, versatile team that could have good matches with just about anyone. Their best work, of course, was against the Dudleys and the Hardys, with the various ladder, table, and TLC matches going down in history as some of the most awe-inspiring spectacles to ever take place in a WWE ring. Though they won the tag titles on 7 different occasions, there was always a sense that, good as they were together, WWE saw singles runs for both, especially Edge, in their futures. Splitting up as a full-time team in the summer of 2001, both men would go on to win tag gold with various other partners, though they would occasionally reunite for brief spells. And you know what? Whenever they did get the band back together, it inevitably totally reeked of awesomeness. Number 8, The New Day. With their individual careers going nowhere fast, Kofi Kingston, Big E, and Xavier Woods banded together as a trio in 2014. Their initial gospel gimmick didn't get over and fans rejected the act. However, thanks to perseverance, personality, and the power of positivity, The New Day not only weathered that early storm, but ended up solidifying their status as one of the most beloved acts in WWE history and one of the top tag teams of all time. While their ridiculous charisma, catchphrases, and shenanigans is what they will by and large be remembered for, it's worth remembering that Woods, Kingston, and E, who took advantage of the Freebird rule to great effect, could get business done inside the ring too. Their series of matches with the Usos in particular stand out as some of the best tag matches in modern WWE history. Having won the WWE, Raw, SmackDown, and even NXT double straps, not to mention world title runs for Kofi and Big E, a future induction into WWE's Hall of Fame seems as secure as the lifelong friendship the three of them have formed over the past decade. Off-screen, I mean. Look at what they did to my Manny. Their position on our countdown may well have been even higher had they had a higher overall caliber of opposition to square off with across their entire run, or 1 or 2 more classic matches and feuds. Number 7, The Usos. Jimmy and Jey Uso have been setting the pace in the WWE tag division since day one. Well, day one-ish anyway. Signing with WWE in 2009, the Usos came into the fold with something of a ready-made rep, not due to any standout work on the indies or anything, but because they were members of the sprawling Anoa'i wrestling dynasty. Starting out as bland babyfaces in pleather shorts and face paint, the Usos took their time to get going and properly establish themselves, but once they did, there was no looking back. They turned from simply good to great and became far more compelling when they turned heel in 2016. Their chemistry was enviable, and with a bit more attitude and some better teams to work with, they began to fulfill their potential. That said, the ceiling was even higher for Rikishi's kids, and their inclusion in the bloodline and the resultant years-long saga that ensued put them in rarefied air as far as a tag team that were a genuine main event act that could feasibly close out WrestleMania. The Bloodline stuff wasn't all amazing, granted, but most of it was pretty damn great, and the Usos had gotten to the point where they had seen and done it all as a duo, wrestling everyone and winning umpteen titles. The breakup was inevitable, and it's since revealed Jey is the Shawn Michaels of the pair. My condolences to Jimmy Uso. And as much as I want to see them both succeed solo, I truly hope we haven't seen the last of them together. Number 6, The Hart Foundation. While many of the great tag teams combine 2 performers who are somewhat similar in size and wrestling style, the thing that made the Hart Foundation stand apart was the stark contrast between Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart. The barrel-chested powerhouse and the smooth technician were a well-oiled machine between the ropes, with the strengths of the other making up for their own perceived weaknesses. The Anvil added the explosiveness and the charisma with his wild interviews and cartoonish facial expressions, while the Hitman was the glue that kept their matches together as Bret worked his tail off and made sure that the psychology was as tight as his submission holds. Having belters with every team around, the Hart Foundation gradually moved up the card and won their first set of tag titles from favourite opponents, the British Bulldogs. They held them for the majority of 1987 before dropping them to Strikeforce, but continued to be a force in the doubles division and got a second turn with the gold in 1990. It was another solid 200+ day run which came to an end at the hands of the Nasty Boys at WrestleMania 7. After that, the Hart Foundation went their separate ways as Bret pursued a solo career. Bret would, of course, become the best there ever was, but he likely wouldn't have been ready for it were it not for his time tagging with his Hall of Fame partner and extended family member. Number 5, the Midnight Express. There were two distinct versions of the Midnight Express tag team, and no, we're not going to dignify the existence of the new Midnight Express here, with each one being as good as the other in their own way and having a claim to being the best heel tag team of the 1980s, if not of all time. The glue that held both versions together was beautiful Bobby Eaton, who first tagged with Loverboy Dennis Condrey between 1983 and 87, which is when Sweet Stan Lane stepped into his place. In Mid-South and for Crockett, the Midnight Express, forever managed by a tennis racket-wielding Jim Cornette, tore it up with many teams and had legendary chemistry with arch rivals the Rock and Roll Express. The Midnights were masters of using every trick imaginable to isolate an opponent after they had bumped their backsides off to shine them up, of course, before getting ready to bump their backsides off all over again when the hot tag was made. Condrey and Eaton won the NWA tag titles once and the UWF tag belts twice, while Eaton and Lane had one run with the WCW tag titles and 3 reigns as WCW US tag champs. The Midnight Express were great, and it just worked, either in a smoky hall during the territory days or as a featured act on a pay-per-view. Oh, and the theme music still slams too. Number 4, the Hardy Boyz. Growing up with a makeshift wrestling ring in their backyard, Matt and Jeff Hardy knew that there was only one thing they wanted to do in this world. Along with the indies, including their own Omega promotion, the brothers from North Carolina also did enhancement work for WWE during the 90s, their performances earning them a developmental deal and ultimately a call-up to the main roster. While revitalizing tag team wrestling during the Attitude Era, the Hardys became one of the hottest acts in the business. Truly the most spectacular team of their time, Matt and Jeff will have a place on the highlight reel for eternity due to their exploits in various TLC-type matches. They were great even without the gimmicks, of course, which is why WWE were always keen to reunite them despite them having exceptional solo careers in their own right. Displaying rather extraordinary longevity in spite of the punishing style they practiced, Matt and Jeff also had notable runs in TNA, Ring of Honor, and AEW. The legs may have gone a bit, but the Hardys remain a timeless act that still elicits such a strong reaction wherever they go and are still winning championships as a pair to this very day. The sheer quantity of incredible Hardy Boyz matches, moments, and title reigns is quite frankly ridiculous, and even though other teams have liberally borrowed from their act over the years, there will never be another quite like these true originals. Number 3, the Rock and Roll Express. Brushing past the fact that this man and this man were supposed to be desirable heartthrobs, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson together were able to create so much sympathy that they had fans ready to run into the ring to save them. Typically a lot smaller than their opponents, especially during their 1980s heyday, the Rock and Roll Express had to use their quickness, agility, and resourcefulness to their advantage, but weren't afraid to get scrappy if the occasion called for it. Practitioners of the Southern tag team wrestling style they initially learned in Memphis, Morton and Gibson, particularly Morton, were masters of selling and often looked like they were on death's door right before making an explosive hot tag and comeback. Perennial babyfaces, they were incredibly over and helped draw money in various territories, as evidenced by their many sets of tag titles and other accolades. They had great matches with everyone, but gelled particularly well with the like-minded Midnight Express, every iteration they came across in fact, but especially Bobby Eaton and Dennis Condrey. The Rock and Roll Express were very influential to other high-flying pretty boy tag teams, with duos like the Rockers emerging as a direct response to their popularity. Amazingly, as of recording this in 2025, the Hall of Famers are still going strong on the indies, often teaming with Ricky's son, Kerry Morton. It may be almost 40 years since they set the Carolinas alight, but people still adore the Rock and Roll Express, and their formula is foolproof and seemingly age-proof too. Number 2, the Dudley Boys. Thrown together as a tag team by Paul Heyman and ECW, Bubba Ray and Devon managed to separate themselves from the rest of the tie-dye wearing Dudley clan. Accomplishing pretty much all there was to accomplish in the land of extreme, the Dudleys left as 8-time ECW World Tag Team Champions, having wrestled everyone there was to wrestle. A scenery change was needed, and they hit the ground running in WWE, getting over thanks to a storyline where they put multiple women through tables, not to mention their epic series of matches with Edge and Christian and the Hardys. All told, the Dudleys won the WWE tag titles on 9 occasions and the WCW tag straps once during their 5-year run, where they were effective as both heels and babyfaces and were brought back together despite efforts to separate them in a vain attempt to make them single stars. Because honestly, the simple truth was that Bubba and Devon were just better together, even if they did get a little stale every now and again. Leaving WWE in 2005, they resurfaced in TNA as Team 3D and won 3 sets of tag titles there. Overseas, they bagged gold in Hustle and New Japan too. A Hall of Fame tag team, whichever way you slice it, the Dudley Boys had an incredible run over the course of the best part of 30 years and still provoke a powerful, nostalgia-fueled response on the rare occasions they team up today. Number 1, the Road Warriors. You cannot manufacture an aura, and of the hundreds upon hundreds of notable tag teams throughout professional wrestling history, none had an aura quite like the Road Warriors. When they started their sports entertainment journey, Hawk and Animal were 2 brickhouse bodybuilders that were more than a little rough around the edges. But the team proved to be immensely popular thanks to their high-impact, sometimes borderline reckless style, striking face paint, and spiked shoulder pads inspired by the Mad Max movies. In the 80s, they were top dogs in Georgia, the AWA, and overseas in Japan, bulldozing their way through the competition with their breathtaking Doomsday Device finisher. They came to national prominence with their move to Jim Crockett Promotions in 1986, though they only had 1 run as NWA World Tag Team Champs. The one thing about Hawk and Animal is that whenever their time in a promotion came to an end, they were easily able to find another suitor. They joined WWE in 1990 and were rechristened the Legion of Doom so as not to take away from the Ultimate Warrior, their popularity carrying over with them as they won their first and only set of WWE Tag Team titles at SummerSlam 1991, making them the only team to bag the AWA, NWA, and WWE doubles belts. The rest of the 90s saw them go back and forth between WCW, WWE, and Japan, their highs as a team matched by some serious lows. It was sad to see them deteriorate over time, but the Road Warriors were untouchable for a long while and are still one of the coolest and most intimidating teams in wrestling history. No amount of iffy matches, tasteless angles, or cash-in reboots could destroy a legacy which has seen the team of Hawk and Animal inducted into many halls of fame and be frequently cited by other great teams as the very best ever. What a rush!